Work.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Malibu City Council regular meeting of September 27th, 2021. This meeting is being held by teleconference due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate the Zoom meeting process. Members of the public can participate in the meeting or watch it by going to malibucity.org/virtual meeting. At this screen, you can click on the tab to either just watch the meeting or to sign up to speak on particular items. You will only be able to speak during the meeting if you follow the instructions at malibucity.org/virtual meeting. Once the item is called, no further speaker signups will be allowed, so please make sure you visit malibucity.org/virtual meeting early to sign up to speak and download the Zoom application. The city clerk will call on those who have signed up to speak when the item is called, so you must be present in the Zoom meeting to be recognized. May I have a roll call, Kelsey?
Councilmember Fair? Here. Councilmember Euring?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein?
Here.
Mayor Grisanti?
Here.
You have a quorum with Councilmember Pearson absent.
Do we have any public speakers on the closed session items?
You do have one speaker signed up. It's Helen Wheeler. Just give me a moment to see if we can find her. But it appears she's not in the meeting yet. So that concludes public comment.
Okay. We will now recess to closed session to discuss the items listed on the closed session agenda.
And Mayor Grisanti, if you would permit me, I would just note that the items on the closed session, item number 1 on the closed session agenda relates to potential litigation with the Santa Monica School District related to the school separation issue, and particularly their recent decision to put the city's petition into the regular review process. The council will discuss that tonight in closed session for item 1.
Thank you.
I'll have a further report after the closed session.
Thank you, John. So may we recess now to closed session to discuss the items listed on the closed session agenda. We will reconvene at 6:30 to begin the regular session and hear the closed session report. So if you will all now leave and reconvene, I would appreciate it.
Good girl.
Okay.
Mayor Grisanti, it is 6:30, but we're still missing one of the council members and the city manager is just joining. So if you could give it another minute or two.
Well, I guess I will show mercy. Oh, there. Hey, Bruce. Okay. I'd like to call to order the Malibu City Council regular meeting of September 27th, 2021. The meeting is being held by teleconference due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate this Zoom meeting process. Council members and city staff are participating from remote locations, and all votes will be taken by roll call. Members of the public can participate in the meeting or watch it by going to malibucity.org/virtual meeting. At this screen, you can click on the tab to either just watch the meeting or to sign up to speak on particular items. You will only be able to speak during the meeting if you follow the instructions at malibucity.org/virtual meetings. Once the item is called, no further speaker signups will be allowed, so please make sure you visit malibucity.org/virtual meetings early to sign up to speak and download the Zoom application. The city clerk will call on those who have signed up to speak when the item is called, so you must be present in the Zoom meeting to be recognized. Council members, if you have comments to make during this meeting, please raise your hand and I will call on you in turn so we can make our discussion clear for the record and the public. May I have a roll call, Kelsey?
Councilmember Fair,
Here.
Councilmember Euring,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Here.
Mayor Grisanti,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Okay. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. May I have a closed session report?
Mayor Grisanti, members of the council, good evening. There were two items on the closed session agenda tonight, which began at 5:45. The first was a significant exposure to litigation. That item involved our ongoing dispute with Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District and their recent decision to put the city's petition into the regular review process, as we'll call it. The council took no further action with regard to that item. The second item involved the potential initiation of litigation. The council, by a vote of 4-0, with Councilmember Pearson absent, authorized the initiation of litigation. That initiation has not yet been initiated. Once it is, it will be available in the city clerk's office for the public's review. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Cotty. I understand we're going to make some changes to the agenda. So can we take a moment and go over the changes to the agenda and then we will approve it? I understand item number 4A is going to be delayed to a time uncertain, and that item 4B is going to be moved to 10/11/21. Is that correct, Mr. McClary?
Yes, that's correct. We were hoping to find a date where we could move the appeal item, but I don't think we've been able to settle on a time on that as of yet. And yes, you were correct on the other date for the other item, Mr. Mayor.
Should it be that item 4B should be delayed to a time uncertain, but failing an earlier time, 10/11/21?
If the items continued to a date uncertain, we would need to renotice the appeal.
We don't want to do that. Yeah. Can we continue it to no later than 10/11? Or do we need to come up with an actual date? Bruce, I see your hand up.
Well, maybe John's gonna. I'll hear what John has to say first.
Thank you.
Mayor Grisanti, I was just going to note that it would be helpful for the ongoing litigation if that appeal could be heard on October 6th. If the council could check their schedules, and I'd ask Ms. Pettijohn to do the same, to see whether that appeal could be heard on the 6th of October.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. We were trying to pull that together right before the meeting. And I think we did not able to have time to check with you on your calendar. So I think if that date and time works for you, we would recommend that we continue that item to October 6th at 2 p.m.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah. John, are you able to explain in a way that won't prejudice our rights why it makes a difference if we do it earlier? Because we have a tolling arrangement with respect to the shot clock. So I assume we're going to go forward on the 11th.
Councilmember Silverstein, you are correct, but we do have a hearing on a motion for summary judgment that's scheduled to be heard, I believe, on the 8th. And as you know, as a former litigator, if the parties can mediate and try and resolve disputes before that dispositive motion is heard, it's more likely to result in a settlement. If we can't do it on the 6th, we understand the council schedule, we would move it to the 11th, but we're hopeful that the 6th would work. It just puts us in a position whereby we're trying to resolve the dispute with a motion hanging over our heads, but yet not having that result.
So is it fair to say then, if the council were to affirm the decision below, so to speak, it would moot the claim, whereas if we were to grant the appeal, it would still necessitate the decision? Is that basically what's going on?
You are absolutely correct, and we would certainly be making that argument.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Karen, I see your hand.
Yes, on October 6th, 2 p.m. is not great for me. Can we do that later? 4, 5, 6 p.m.
The problem with that evening is we have a public safety committee that is scheduled that evening. That's the conflict there. We were trying to work around that without obviously affecting that meeting.
Okay.
I can do the 6 to 2.
When does Mikey get back?
I believe October 4th. Mr. Cotty, what have we? I hate to do this in the middle of the meeting, but is there a reason we couldn't look at the following day, the 7th?
No, it's just the night before. It's just, no, that could work.
I have the same problem on the 7th for what it's worth.
Is the conflict issue, Steve, a convenience issue, or is there some legal prohibition against us having two things going on at the same time?
We can't run two meetings at the same time, so we'd have to cancel the one if we were to schedule a council meeting over that, which is an option, but obviously we hate to do that.
Karen, is your conflict on the 5th as well? I can't. Karen? Did you hear me?
Karen's muted.
Sorry about that. No, the 5th, I do not have a conflict.
Is the 5th a possibility? Because I'm looking at the calendar, I have the same conflict on the 6th.
I'm looking at my
calendar. No, I don't have a conflict on the 6th. I have a conflict on the 7th.
Okay, so we're trying to see if we can do something on the 5th. City Clerk Pettijohn, is that an open date?
I'd be able to accommodate that, and we'd have media staff, but I think there might have been an issue in Trevor and Richard's schedules.
I see.
Make one more suggestion. Was it public safety that the conflict was? Can they just start their meeting an hour later?
They could adjourn their meeting to a later time.
In the same night. I mean, they don't have to cancel it. They could just start it a little later and we can get done before they start.
Might be an option.
That doesn't do me any good. Well, that does me good, but it doesn't do Karen any good because I think that's a travel day for you, Karen.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought Karen said she needed a later time on Wednesday, that would work.
Hold on, am I muted? Sorry.
No, you're on.
Oh, sorry. Let me look at my calendar. On the 6th. Yeah, 2 p.m. is tough. If we could do it later, that'd be better for me. The 5th for me is the best date.
I believe that staff is not available. I believe Richard is not available on the 5th. I don't know if he's on. But
Okay.
There's
Yes,
Richard.
I'm here. We can on the 5th. Are we talking about doing it in the afternoon or after 5:30? My conflict is after 6 o'clock, but I can have staff available.
Okay. I mean, what about 2 o'clock on the 5th? Does that work?
Works for me. Bruce?
I'm pretty sure. Is that Tuesday?
That is a Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Steve, Euring, is that okay with you?
Muted, Steve.
I'm looking. Just give me a second.
All right.
2 o'clock on the 5th?
Yeah.
I can hit that. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
What are we looking at? About 90 minutes, maybe? Max?
You may get a lot of speakers. This is,
Okay.
So, Mr. Cotta, I believe that unfortunately Mr. Russian has a conflict on that date.
2 p.m. on the 5th works.
Oh, it does. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, can somebody reconstruct the motion so that, because I think I've screwed it up badly enough that I need professional help?
That has
We're,
multiple
uh,
meanings.
Can I also interject because 4A, I believe we were hoping to continue to a date certain, which will be the council meeting of November 8th.
Yes, thank you. That's
Okay.
correct.
I'll move to redo the agenda to move 4A to the date that Lisa just said, date and time, and the 4B to Tuesday the 5th at 2 p.m.
Perfect.
Okay, I'll second that motion. All in favor?
aye.
Mayor Grisanti,
Need
if
a
I
roll
could do
call.
a roll call.
Sorry. Thank you, Kelsey.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes,
motion carries.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. And thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Karen, and thank you, Steve. Can we get a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was properly posted on September 16th, 2021, with the amended agenda posted on September 23rd, 2021.
Item number 1A is an update on school district separation. Is there anything to report?
Good evening, Mayor Grisanti. Just very briefly, as many of you are aware, the Los Angeles County Office of Education County Committee on School Organization made a decision on the 18th to move the city's petition to unify and create an independent Malibu Unified School District. That petition has been moved forward into the regular process. We're at the School Separation Ad Hoc Committee and city staff are very excited about this process and look forward to the upcoming additional public hearings that will look at the city's full petition on unification. I don't want to take up the council's time with more details. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer those questions, but I just wanted to provide the council with that update. Also to mention to the council that Lako County Committee released a staff report that's available on the city's website. And that staff report makes some serious kind of assertions about whether or not the city's petition in full will be whether or not the city will be able to meet the standards by law to be able to unify. It's just important for the council and the community to remember the city has just started to create its full feasibility study. City staff and the ad hoc committee are fully confident that we will be able to meet all 9 of the criteria when the law requires us to. And that will be within the next 120 days or so. But if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
I see Bruce has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Christine, there's been some confusion in the public about the effect of the meeting and the decision. Can you confirm that it is not the case that anybody has said we cannot meet the multiple criteria? It is only that we can meet one, and the people that are making the decision don't have adequate information to assess the others. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. It's important to remember this is something that's never been done to our knowledge in the state before, where a city has brought a petition to unify and create its own school district. And so this preliminary public hearing that was held first in April and then concluded just last week, that preliminary public hearing had never happened before. And what the standard was going to be for that hearing. The city always understood that the standard would be a sufficiency standard. The school district was advocating for a full hearing on the merits of the petition. And we understood that that was not the case. That wasn't the time for that. And eventually Lako agreed with us. It was not the time for that this was a sufficiency hearing. They found our petition to be sufficient, which is why they could move us into the full process. The report that they published specifically said that there wasn't enough information for them to make a determination about the 9 criteria. That's what the report said. I know it's been spun in the media that we couldn't meet the criteria. We never attempted to meet the criteria because it wasn't the point at the time. So we will meet the criteria. We've been studying the criteria since we wouldn't have wasted the city's resources if we thought the city couldn't meet the criteria. The city is going to be able to meet the criteria at the due time.
So we actually won one of the 9 and Santa Monica hasn't won any. Is that right?
That is right, Councilmember Silverstein.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Mayor.
I believe that takes us to item 2A, which is written and oral communication from the public. Do we have anybody who wants to address us on matters which are not on the agenda, but for which the City Council has subject matter jurisdiction?
Yes, Mayor, you have 4 speakers tonight. They are Forrest Curtis, Carrie Davis, Michael Dulst, and Joe Drummond. We'll hear from Forrest first.
Forrest, are you in the meeting?
Oh, yes, I am. Sorry. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to give a comment. Good evening, Mayor Gristani and honorable council members. My name is Forrest Curtis, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Hilda Bay, an environmental nonprofit based here in Los Angeles with 35 years of experience dedicated to health and safety of our local beaches, waterways, and coastal resources. I want to direct your attention to the significantly reduced beach access currently occurring in Malibu due to 2 barriers. The first barrier is the stairway from Point Dume down to Dume Cove. This access point remains closed when it was anticipated to be opened after much delay already in the summer of 2021. Summer has already ended and the stairway is not open. Functionally, this is keeping nearly a mile of beach closed because the only other access point to this beachfront is through the Paradise Cove, which has a parking lot that costs $35 and requires a significant walk. The second barrier is a pedestrian closure of nearly a mile-long expanse of Westwood Beach. On Saturday, August 21st, the access road to Westwood Beach parking was destroyed by extremely high tides, a sign of coming sea level rise impacts that are a whole issue on their own. Westwood Beach Road remains open, but the pedestrian access to Westwood Beach from Zuma South or Point Dume Headlands was temporarily closed. Patch.com stated that the Point Dume Headlands access was closed so that the washout of the Point Dume access road does not result in Point Dume residents being inundated with tourists seeking to get to Westward Beach through the residential neighborhoods. This lack of access through the Headlands Trail due to pressure from wealthy residents is a violation of the Coastal Act, and it is not only limiting beach access to residents and visitors, but to researchers as well. Hilda Bay, along with a number of other programs, conducts research in this area. Our MPA Watch program has been forced to unnecessarily close 3 of our transects, one of which for nearly 2 years now. Our volunteers and staff need access to these beaches to perform our scientific research, and more importantly, the public requires access to these beaches through the Coastal Act. I also want to point out my further concern for the amount of parking restriction additions that are being discussed in this meeting today, further limiting beach access in Malibu. We are aware that this is a logistical nightmare and that the city has been working hard to restore access to these areas, and we have 2 requests. The first request is to open the Point Dume Headlands Access Trail to Westward Beach immediately to allow access to that beach. And the second, we ask for transparent and reasonable scheduling to be committed to for the opening of the beaches and access points indefinitely. Vulnerable community members, including low-income communities, have historically and disproportionately had reduced access to our coast and oceans, and this unfortunate history is being repeated today with these access restrictions. This is an urgent need, and we ask the council to seriously consider our recommendations today. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment. I am available for questions if you have them.
Thank you, Forrest. I'm going to take a moment and just when we're done, I'll comment on that. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Yes, our next speaker is Terry Davis.
Hi, Terry. Are you in the room?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Well, good evening, council members. I have 2 items that I want to address briefly, and one of them is to personally invite you, Mayor, and the City Council members to our Malibu's next Homeless Connect Day, our first since COVID, but probably around our 6th, I think, in total. And that will be held Thursday, October 7th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Outside the old Malibu courthouse. It will be taking place almost entirely outside due to COVID. And I invite people to call to volunteer to work the event, and that number is 323-961-0499. Again, to volunteer, please call 323-961-0499. My second item is totally different, and that has to do with fire department citations for violations in terms of brush clearance, dead trees, things like that. Fire's a danger. We know the fire danger. The problem is the fire department comes out, it cites individuals, owners for violations, but there is no follow-up. And now with the nuisance code, the emergency designation, and the VHFHSZ, the very high fire hazard situation zone that Malibu is in, we need to somehow follow up with some sort of demand on these individuals, these owners who are not following through. Many of these people lease these homes, so they're also then putting the people who are renting them in danger. So there's got to be some follow-up. If the city can help do that, we in Big Rock have tried to follow up with the fire department, but we're not in a position to do that. So we're asking for the city's help in following up on these violations with some repercussions to protect the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. Who do we have next? Kelsey, who's our next speaker?
So sorry, I was muted. Our next speaker would be Michael Dulst, but I don't see him in the meeting quite yet. So we'll circle back in a moment and we'll hear from Joe Drummond.
Hi, Joe. Are you in the meeting?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Honorable City Council, just a few weeks ago, the Coastal Commission released its Critical Infrastructure at Risk Sea Level Rise Planning Guidance for California's Coastal Zone, dated August 2021. Right at the beginning, it states that oftentimes the solution embraced by coastal communities is to armor the shoreline to protect infrastructure such as seawalls. While this may be a reasonable alternative to be considered in the short and midterm, it is often less clearly understood that such armoring can have significant adverse impacts on the beach and shoreline where the armoring is installed. In fact, reliance on shoreline armoring as long-term solution will eventually lead to the loss of many beaches and wetlands, eliminating precious recreational opportunities and whole ecosystems, as well as their related benefits such as biodiversity, fish nurseries, flood protection, and water quality enhancement. These are the elements of our coast that provide a social fabric and identify and drive local communities and economies. Their protection must also be an important part of the infrastructure adaptation discussion. It goes on later to state, moreover, the physical land on which infrastructure is currently located will in some cases be submerged underwater in the future, fundamentally changing the landscape and limiting potential adaptation strategies. Finally, planning infrastructure adaptation can take decades, multiplying the complexity of the planning process and magnifying the uncertainty. The guidance recommends local governments and asset managers prioritize nature-based adaptation strategies in all new sea level rise adaptation planning efforts. It also recommends the state agencies work together to strengthen and accelerate opportunities for using nature-based adaptation strategies. I understand the Malibu Living Shoreline project is delayed because of COVID. Santa Monica apparently is having success with their pilot program in lowering beach erosion near Annenberg. When will Malibu start this project? Also in the Coastal Commission's document, all communities and asset managers should consider the following principles in infrastructure planning. Site infrastructure to avoid hazards where hazard avoidance is not feasible. Prioritize nature-based adaptation strategies over hard shoreline armoring. I counted 5 beachfront projects approved, and most of them started from the Ellison project at Carbon Beach, which actually was based only on sea level rise of 8 to 18 inches over a 100-year period, when the Coastal Commission report suggests the figure is more like 10 feet and less than that by the time of 2100. Will you stop approving such huge beachfront development until we have completed beach erosion mitigation projects in place? According to the Coastal Conservancy study completed April 19, 2016, for the high estimate of sea level rise scenario, the beach erosion and wave runoff analysis suggests that Nicholas Canyon Beach may be completely eroded by 2040 if no shoreline measure is implemented. Malibu Surfrider Beach, Topanga Beach, and Will Rogers State Beach will only have approximately 50% of beach or less left in 2040. These 4 beaches are forecast to be completely eroded by 2100. The analysis results suggest that Zuma Beach and Point Dume Beach will have 50% of beach left in 2040 and more than 30% of the beach remaining in 2100. I hope that this can be a priority. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
And Mayor Grisanti, I still don't see Michael Dulst in the meeting, so that concludes public comment.
Very good. Thank you so much. That takes us back to, do we have any commission or committee updates?
I'm sorry, no, you don't have any commission reports tonight.
Okay, do we have a city manager update?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a few items this evening. A couple of announcements to start here. One, the city was recently certified as a blue city. The nonprofit organization Project O has certified the city of Malibu as a blue city through the Blue City Network in recognition of Malibu's commitment to healthy waterways and oceans. The Blue City certification uses a data-driven approach to assess each community's efforts towards protecting the world's oceans. And now that we're certified, we've become part of that network, a coalition of communities from around the world that collaborate in their ongoing work to protect the environment. Malibu completed a thorough assessment of its current environmental initiatives and programs, and it resulted in a rating based on a total number of points received. Malibu scored 360 out of a possible 500, which placed the city in the Ocean Champion tier. So I have to announce that. Also wanted to note that the city earned an award for transparency and excellency in financial reporting. This was received from the Government Finance Officers Association of the US and Canada, also known as the GFOA. And this was awarded for the city's fiscal year 1920 annual comprehensive financial report. I think this is notable because this is the 20th consecutive year that the city has received this award for transparency and excellence in financial reporting from the GFOA. Also wanted to note that the city has a public safety expo coming up on October 2nd. That's going to be Saturday, excuse me, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at City Hall. This is going to be an in-person outdoors event. You can learn how to prepare your, excuse me, family, home, business, school, or organization for wildfires, earthquakes, and other disasters. So again, that'll be at Malibu City Hall. This is a free event and it's part of the city's 2021 National Preparedness Month, and will feature crisis first aid training, emergency preparedness equipment vendors, volunteer opportunities, and more. For more information, you can email the city at publicsafety@malibucity.org, or you can visit the city's webpage. Also wanted to report that last week, along with several members of council and staff, I attended the League of California Cities annual conference in Sacramento, California. It was nice to be in person back with some of our colleagues from around the state. It was a good conference and an excellent educational and networking opportunity. Also just wanted to note for council, when we had adopted the license plate readers, I think it was 2 weeks ago, council had asked that we come back in 30 days with the policies for that. We're going to need a little bit more time on that, so we're going to push that out to the meeting on October 25th. In the meantime, we will not be activating the system in any way. So I just wanted to let you know, we'll just need a little bit more beyond that 30 days, and then we'll be bringing it back to council. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Who would like to, next item is City Council Subcommittee reports, Mayor and Council Member meetings, attendance reports, and inquiries. Who would like to go first? Karen.
Thanks, Paul. Let's see, as far as public comments went, Ms. Curtis from Heal the Bay, I believe the items you're talking about fall under the jurisdiction of California State Parks and LA County Beaches and Harbors. So thank you for your comments. I'm sure those agencies would be able to answer some of your questions. Terry Davis, thank you. Yes, I'm really glad to see the county doing Homeless Connect Day again. I'm sorry I won't be able to go this year, but I look forward to the next one. I want to thank the city manager and the staff, particularly Yolanda Bundy and her department, for all the work that it went into the Blue City certification. Most of that work had already been done by the city. It was just a matter of transferring that information into the application. So it was great to be prepared and to get that commendation. And also the financial reporting. I think it's noteworthy that this is the 20th year that the city has been commended on transparency in financial reporting. And I'm really glad we're getting back to in-person on a lot of things, particularly the Public Safety Expo on Saturday. So I hope to see a lot of people there. As far as my own activity, there was quite a bit of work that went into preparation for the Laco County Committee hearing on school district separation, which was September 18th. And I think many of you already know, but we did have a victory that day. We met the sufficiency, which I think we met it very clearly, so that we can now be moved into the regular process for school district separation. On the 15th, I was at a county library commission meeting. I also attended the Contract Cities Fall Educational Summit, and I was very happy to see Father Greg Boyle of Homeboy Industries as the keynote speaker. And as our city manager said, several of us were at the California Cities annual conference up in Sacramento, and a lot of worthy sessions there. Panel discussions that I attended were climate change adaptation and wildfire mitigation, changing wildfire prevention paradigm, and something brand new to me. It's called the Democratic Lottery, also known as the Citizens Assembly or the deliberative model, which is a way to get more community participation in city decision making. So I'm hoping we can implement that sometime soon. We have so many important issues in front of us. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Steve, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Spent some time over the last couple of weeks. I've been getting a number of calls from residents who are concerned that some of the new development that's going on is not consistent with some of the rules we have for rebuilding. And last week, Richard Malika was kind enough to go out and do some site visits with us to take a look at some of those issues. We've got some work to do to figure them out, but it was good. And I think the residents were glad to see that we had city staff trying to participate and make sure we were doing things correctly. So I'd like to thank Richard for doing that. There was an article, I think it was in the Malibu Times, that talked about some 54 school children were either, some were infected with COVID, some were in isolation, and some were in quarantine. I'm just wondering, Karen, do you know the status of any of those kids? I mean, are they okay? Anybody chase that? And do you know if the school district is going to do any kind of sourcing to try and figure out where that infection came from? Because that's a pretty big jump. I mean, I think we were sort of moving along with on a very low level for a while, and then all of a sudden it jumped up. So just be interesting to see where that came from. And there was I got some emails last week regarding a party that took place up in Big Rock. Apparently there were some 200 people at some product introduction party that went on until some hours of the night. And I know we had our enforcement people go up and take a look. But when I took a look at it at the end, I mean, I got to believe a product endorsement product, the guy who was running the party probably made 10 or 15 grand as a result of hosting that. And the fine for him running that party illegally is going to be less than $500. And so I guess my takeaway is that if we're really serious about trying to enforce some of the rules that we have and making sure that people pay attention, we've got to take I think a serious look at the fines that we can impose and how we make them solid enough to make sure people are paying attention to us. So Lisa, you're smarter about this stuff than I am. So maybe at our next admin and finance committee meeting, or however, we just should discuss it. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think $500, if I had a $500 fine and I can make 15 grand for running the party, I'd be doing the party every second day. So I think it's just worth taking a look at. If you could sort of put that on your radar screen someplace, that would be helpful. And then the last one was, I spent some time this week taking a look at the Planning Commission meeting where they talked about the Westward Beach project. And it was one of the most bizarre meetings I've ever seen. It's a project, it was a high priority project for the city council, I guess. So it was put together by Public Works. It went to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission was told that no matter what, they can't do anything to make the project any better than what they've got in front of them, which I think, I thought the Planning Commission's job was to help us get projects right and make sure they were doing them correctly. So I'm wondering, Steve, is that project going to come in front of the city council, or is it done with the Planning Commission? Steve McClary, do you know?
Richard, could you jump on and help with that question? I think Richard could give a better answer than I could.
Good evening. Unless the project is appealed, it will not be coming before the city council. The Planning Commission it was only a coastal development permit that was needed. There were no ordinances or code amendments. And so because of that, the Planning Commission's decision would be the final one unless appealed. And it's also up for, there's the appeal period to the city council, and then also the appeal period to the Coastal Commission.
Yeah, it was just interesting. If it was a city council approved project or priority project, that the city council is never going to get a look at what the end result looks like, which I thought was kind of strange, but okay, it is what it is. That's all I got, Paul.
Thank you so much, Steve. Bruce?
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so first I'll address two of the public comments. The comment from Ms. Curtis from Hilda Bay. Listening to the comments, I have a very difficult time believing that Hilda Bay has been unable to access the beach to perform research because of the two issues that were identified. I mean, it seems to me there's something else behind those comments, and the reference to the access on Point Dume being cut off because a bunch of wealthy people didn't want their neighborhood disturbed by what would essentially be hundreds of people that don't belong there. Doesn't make, I'm offended by that, but just make that comment. Cherry Davis, you know, maybe we should, on the issue of follow-up for the brush clearance, this is something I'm going to ask the city look at, is perhaps nuisance abatement proceedings can be commenced whenever the fire department issues a citation and after some specified period of time that can be established by the city, no action's taken. So the fire department doesn't have to follow up on that. If there's been no brush clearance and there's been a citation issued, I would think that's a basis for deciding that there's a nuisance there and following up by the city. As far as last 2 weeks, what have I been doing? So I watched the school district separation meeting last weekend. I didn't speak, but I did watch from the beginning to end to further educate myself on the issues, and I came away further informed. Every time there's a meeting like that, you learn information. I've been in, every week I'm in daily communication with multiple residents. The past 2 weeks, multiple inquiries have been typically from residents and folks outside of Malibu about the new camping ordinance and how it's going to be enforced, which we were told it will be, and it remains to be seen how it will be. And also issues pertaining to Picasso, which is the unofficial and unlawful timeshare operation that's being conducted in areas zoned residential. And what are we doing about that? And I know we're looking at that. You know, I want to say that the short-term rentals seems to me, and Bill Sampson comes to meetings a lot and says this, to me, they fall in the same category. They're just illegal businesses being conducted in areas that are zoned residential, which are not supposed to be used as businesses. So if our short-term rental ordinance doesn't get past coastal, we should probably give some thought to whether we should just enforce our zoning laws. As always, I spent substantial time preparing for this meeting. I read the stuff cover to cover. I make a lot of notes. I write questions. Otherwise, I've been dealing with a freak accident that created substantial damage to my home, which necessitated an emergency move while my home's being repaired. So I'm in the process of trying to dig out from hundreds of boxes that were packed on an emergency basis. Oh, the last point is, I read that many cities have adopted COVID-19 protocols for their employees, which require that employees be either vaccinated or subjected to regular testing as a condition to employment. And nobody can force anyone to be vaccinated, but as a condition of employment, you can have consequences for not being vaccinated. And I think that that's something the city definitely should be looking at. I don't know what the answer is or should be, but it's something that should be considered. So I'll ask that be done if it hasn't been done. And that's it for my comments tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. I too went to the League of Cities meetings. I saw a lot of really interesting presentations by a lot of different people. I met some of our various suppliers in the expo, which was interesting, and saw one of my friends there, which is Smart Coast California. And through the offices of Smart Coast California, I was introduced to two members of the Coastal Commission during that meeting as well, which I thought was well worth my time. I also, during that meeting, was able to get rid of about 50 of my cards and came home with more than 50 cards from other people who are in different communities who have interesting ideas about what we should be doing. I did continue my practice of returning all emails that I get, and that works out to an average of probably 6 or 8 a day. And I appreciate the opportunity to interact with members of the public. And so that's not a problem. Very gratified to see that we got the finance award for the 20th year in a row, which is great. As far as Forrest Curtis, Forrest, the next time you're going to accuse us of doing something, please call me. My number is 310-505-5006. I'll be glad to tell you who actually owns the property you're complaining about, so that you don't come to complain to us about something that we didn't do and we have no control over. The other thing that I would like to mention is, by all means, I hope everyone can come out next Saturday morning to come into City Hall and see the Preparedness Expo. CERT team is going to be there. Arson Watch is going to be there. All sorts of vendors are going to be there. You have children, bring them, because the sheriffs and the fire department are going to have pieces of equipment, and your kids ought to see that stuff and get used to it. And that's, I'm sure I'm forgetting something else, but we'll move on from there. And I believe that brings us to the consent calendar. So are we pulling, does anybody want to pull any items from the consent calendar?
Mayor Grisanti, there are 3 items that have been pulled by the public. They are 3A1, 3B6, and 3B8.
3A1, 3B6, and 3B8?
Correct.
Okay. And do any members of the council want to pull anything?
Yeah, I would like to pull 3B7 and 3B9.
3B9. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of 3A1, 3B6, 3B7, 3B8, and 3B9?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. Kelsey, will you be kind enough to take the roll?
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to 3A1. And that was pulled by the public, I believe. Is that correct?
It was pulled by the public, and you have 13 speakers on this item. 9 of them will need translation. Mayor Grisanti, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but I know Jim Braden has raised his hand.
Oh, I should have gotten a report from Jim before we went to the consent calendar. Jim, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting.
Oh, no problem at all. And yeah, so reporting wise, let me start off with, over the weekend, they had the triathlon. It went as smooth as it can go for the type of operation it is. There's always going to be inconveniences to the community in certain ways. Saturday went smooth. Sunday, there was a couple different incidents. One was along PCH near Morning View, where a 16-year-old in an unguarded area made a U-turn and hit a bicyclist, which she was transported to the hospital, but with what turned out to be not major injuries. That was about 9:30 in the morning. Then about 10 o'clock, there was another bicyclist and somehow was unable to maneuver to miss a bicycle repair vehicle trying to help somebody else out at Mulholland and PCH, and a collision occurred there when she struck a vehicle that was stopped. But again, it was minor injuries. So overall, it went pretty smooth. we had two other fatalities on PCH, one on the 15th in the evening, one on the 16th in the morning, early in the morning. The one on the 15th is still under investigation, and I haven't been able to review any video from that yet. But again, it was an unhoused individual that was on the roadway and was struck by a vehicle. There's no evidence in that one that the vehicle was traveling at excessive speed, no impairment of the driver or anything like that. So that one's still under investigation. The other one that occurred on the 16th in the morning was a construction worker named Eric Berg crossing the street to go work at a house on the south side of PCH. He crossed in a crosswalk. He kind of exited the crosswalk a tiny bit as he approached the curb area, and he was struck by a vehicle, which was a commercial vehicle. It was a van. The operator of the van was not cited at the scene. However, the investigation is ongoing, and he admitted to using his cell phone seconds before the crash occurred, and they'll be able to obtain that as evidence. There was also a factor of going in a 45-mile-an-hour area at approximately 70 to 73 miles an hour. And there was another factor that he ran through a red light there. So all those things together, the detective, I've spoken to him, there's a huge possibility that there'll be a vehicular manslaughter charge on this person, because of his inattention while operating the vehicle, that with all three of those factors, that he cost someone their life. And it's sad. Like Karen Farrar had sent me the GoFundMe page for Eric Berg, and you see him there with his wife and his two little kids. That is sad. When you're operating a vehicle, you have to be attentive, and you have to pay attention to operating the vehicle. That's very unfortunate. Then there was another fatality that occurred over the Labor Day weekend, toward the end of the weekend. That one I have reviewed video that was obtained, and the person, they weren't in a guarded area, so they're not in a crosswalk or anything. But the person did run from the south side of PCH to an area where there's pilings, like the cone things, or plastic things that separate the lanes. And he did stop there for a moment, as if he was attentive to the traffic, but somehow he misjudged how far away a car was. And it wasn't that the car was traveling at excessive speed either, but he entered that other side of the roadway with the westbound traffic and was struck by the vehicle. And I mean, he was showing some attention because he stopped in the middle. He didn't just run straight across the whole road. So, however, he entered the roadway in front of the vehicle, and the vehicle was unable to respond and the vehicle's going at appropriate speed. So, the other ones, I'll report back if there's a filing on the one with the construction worker. What other things do we have? Over the weekend, I was contacted, and I saw a bunch of posts on Nextdoor. There was some people, a motorhome, a tent, and some other people on a piece of property that's in Trancas Park, like the park area, the land there. And the deputies, the residents, I'll give you this. They did the appropriate thing because they called. They see people out there, and that's what I asked you guys to do. If you see people around the city, that helps us. You're the eyes. So when they called, they went out there. This person expressed some that they had some ownership interest in the property. Well, it came back to me. So I was gonna basically this morning, I was gonna find out if that was true or not, and then respond appropriately to the person there. But when I sent a unit out there this morning, at 7:30, the people were already gone. But we'll keep an eye on the area, and continue to call up. And it doesn't mean, like I watched some of the banter on Nextdoor, and it's not that Nextdoor is everything, but people got to accept there's limitations to what we can do. But once you introduce us into something, you have to give me a little time sometimes to follow up on something to see if something's true or not true, things like that. But absolutely, the front end part of people reporting that to us is an important part of all these things coming together, even with the camping ordinance, all these things. That's what will make it work, is people watching and people letting me know or having the deputies respond to situations. We did send units out and cleaned up, helped the city, and they cleaned up that area at Dan Blocker Beach, any of the debris along the beach related to people living down there. So that was cleaned up. We also did an operation, which I don't think I shared with anybody, because when we do operations, we really don't share it. But we did an operation last Wednesday in the city of Malibu. It's with TRAP. TRAP is the organization. You pay $1 on your registration that funds this operation. These guys are professionals in trying to mitigate issues with stolen vehicles. It's a unit that's comprised from the LA County Sheriff's Department, LAPD, and a few other units also. We did an operation in Malibu. There was 9 of them from the TRAP team, and we had another 9 from Lost Hills. So the operation was last Wednesday. It was in the day into the evening hours, and it netted a total of 6 different arrests for different issues with vehicles and appropriate registration, and one stolen vehicle was located also. So we'll continue to do these operations. There's other operations that we do that if I talk about them, they'll be compromised. But there's other operations going on to try to cut the flow of methamphetamine to the homeless population in Malibu. So, and that one may be fruitful. When we get a result from something, I'll be happy to share it with you. But for now, that's all I'll say on it. I'm open to any questions anybody might have. On the next council meeting, I'm doing a presentation on the next public safety council meeting on department activity, beach team activity for the summer and all that. So that same information I share at the first Wednesday of October, I'll share at the next council meeting with everybody. So.
Thank you, Jim. I see that Bruce has got his hand up, followed by Karen.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so listening to Jim speak about these incidents that have occurred in our small town, it's just, it's an interesting dynamic here. I just want to make a comment on this. We get a lot of emails and phone calls from our residents about various little things, code violations. If this was the city of Los Angeles, we couldn't deal with those things. The city council couldn't address those things. If this were the city of Los Angeles, there's no way we would have the sheriff or the local police coming here and telling us about every major crime that occurred in our city. But we can do that because this is a small town. And it's not Mayberry RFD, but which dates me, but it's a small town, and that's why we live here, and that's why we're doing the job we're doing. So Jim, thank you for all of that information. It's greatly appreciated. The work you're doing is greatly appreciated. And and the sheriff's department has been helping us craft our homeless ordinances. So it's we're working together. Really appreciate it. Paul, after Karen speaks, if I could just make one quick comment about the item that was pulled that we have 13 speakers for before they speak, I would appreciate that. It may be able to help cut things down.
Sure. Karen?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jim, thank you very much for your report and for all the detail and for all the work that goes into making those things happen. But I do have a question. Can you comment on the situation along Coral Beach with the vehicles there? They seem to be creeping back.
Well,
as I drive up and down. And one thing I just wanted to say, I go to Malibu Seafood pretty often, and there's even been comment from the Malibu Seafood employees that it's causing some issues for them at their business because they're, right across the highway.
Yeah, in the I'll make sure the deputies address in cite for the appropriate sections. And I'm not saying it's not an issue because it's a continuous issue. However, when I stayed in Malibu RV Park last October, the first week in October, there was bumper to bumper motorhomes down there, and there was actually 4 tents on the beach. So I would say the problem is 25% of what it was last year, but the effort will be continued. There is some holdouts, and that brings me to one other comment. I really, really, really strongly suggest that in the city of Malibu, that there's some effort made to make a time block in the nighttime where there is no motorhomes allowed in Malibu at all, period, at all, unless you're a resident with a temporary permit to have one. This issue, I have a rental house down in Torrance. I was down there taking care of it. When you drive south on the 405 freeway, there is fruits to our labor in Malibu because a lot of the squalor you see in these places isn't there. However, it's a continuous effort to keep it from building up. But there is certain people in Malibu, they know how to mitigate the rules. And there is a rule of not parking 2 hours at the beach at night. There is also an oversized vehicle ordinance. But the oversized vehicle ordinance makes them move 1,000 feet. That's what it makes them do. And someone that doesn't want to leave the city, they actually do follow the rules. I'm not saying they do every night, and I'm not saying that sometimes they're not citable, and I'll send my guys out to do that. But there needs to be a harder rule on that. And the reason is, in the future, when other cities push to not have homeless people or people living in their vehicles, it's going to come to different areas. And we've seen in Malibu, we've seen where those motorhomes were about 4 times what it is right now. So it's not impossible, but there has to be something that is more limiting, period. And just like I commented on Nextdoor on that other stuff, there's also banter on Nextdoor. Oh, why isn't the overnight vehicle, they act like there's some ban on vehicles overnight. Well, there isn't. There is an oversized vehicle ordinance that makes someone move 1,000 feet every 2 hours. And there is a limiting factor at the beach for 2 hours on each side of the roadway. So in my estimation, there needs to be something more limiting too. So that'd be my comments on it.
Thank you, Jim. Karen?
All right, I just forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Very good. Now we're going back to 3A, and Bruce wanted to make a suggestion, I believe.
He did. I just want to say, I thought 3A1 pretty pro forma. I'm very surprised to hear that we have 11 or 13 speakers, whichever it was. I suspect it's many of the same people that spoke one after another with the same, very similar messages in the past. We heard those messages. I heard them and I understood them and I actually agreed with some of them, which is part of the reason I voted no. But, I understand when I lose, and that motion, that was passed last meeting, and tonight's just to finalize it. I would hope that people are going to keep their comments very brief or not make them at all, because it's just a losing effort at this point. So I'm going to vote no again, but I would hope that the 11 people that are going to speak aren't going to repeat the same things they've said twice now already. Thank you.
Well, Bruce, I was just going to suggest that for consent calendar items, we limit comments to a minute per person. Is that something you would support?
I don't think it's fair process, but.
Okay, well, we were at 2 minutes before, so we'll go with 2 minutes again this time then. All right. So who do we have to speak to us relative to 3A for 2 minutes apiece?
Yes, for 3A1, we have Norman Haney, Priscilla Velasquez, Claudia Monroy, Renee Trotter, Graciela Gomez, Aura Garcia, Yacina Delgado, Yahaira Zelaya, Mildred Flores, Teresa Sanchez, Maria del Carmen Trulio, Cecilia Alvarado, and Freda Natzmer. We'll hear from Norman Haney first.
Thank you, Norman. I hope the 2 minutes is not too constricting for you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Well, first of all, there are 2 items associated with parking that I wanted to clarify. The first is that there's an implication that the 7 parking spaces that are adjacent to the upper driveway are the only ways that the serving area can be increased for the restaurant. The truth of the matter is I have additional parking spaces that are not allocated, and my understanding was that the only way I could use the 7 was that if I had a joint parking agreement, which is fine, and I'm willing to do that, but that shouldn't restrict me from increasing the serving area if I have 2 or 3 additional parking spaces. And I just wanted to make that clear. The second is disappointing to me that all the plans show that I have 9 spaces for the employees. And that was approved by the Planning Commission, unanimously approved, and sent to the City Council. Because the Coastal Commission, a member of the Coastal Commission staff recommended 15 parking spaces when only 9 were actually allocated, that showed up in the project that was approved, and it slipped by me. It's not serious enough for me to change what's going on tonight or the approval that's going on, but it bothers me when the staff will make a change because one member of the coastal staff wants a change. It's not the Coastal Commission. It's an individual who wants the
Norm,
change.
that's your time.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Norm.
Our next speaker is Priscilla Velasquez.
Hello, Priscilla. Are you in the room? Priscilla, are you in the room?
¿Aló? ¿Sí? ¿Me escucha?
Yes. Sí.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Priscila Velázquez. He trabajado en la industria por muchos años. No apoyo este proyecto. Gracias.
I'm going to try to unmute the translator. Jose, if you could translate.
Yes. Priscilla said, good evening. My name is Priscilla Velasquez. I have worked in the hotel industry for many years. I do not agree with this project. Please do not move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
Next, we have Claudia Monroy.
Hello, Claudia. Are you in the room?
Actually, I don't see her. She probably lost the connection.
Okay. We'll move on to Renee Trotter.
I see your hand, Renee.
Yes, I see it too. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I just want to say good evening. I know you still say you're not going to approve it, but I'm still going to have to say what I got to say, which is my name is Renee Trotter. I have worked with Sherrickson Grant for a few years. I do not think that the City Council should approve this project. Thank you. And you guys have a good night.
Thank you, Renee. Who's next?
We have Graciela Gomez.
Hello, Graciela. Are you available?
Sí, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Graciela Gómez y estoy aquí para decirles que por favor no, yo estoy trabajando en un hotel por más de 20 años y sé cómo es la situación. Por favor, no estoy de acuerdo con este proyecto. Gracias por su atención. Vote no.
Good evening. My name is Graciela Gomez, and I have worked in the hotel industry for 20 years. And I do not agree with this project. Please do not move forward with this. Thank you.
Graciela.
Our next speaker is Aura Garcia.
Hello, Aura, are you available?
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Aura García y trabajo en el Four Points Sheraton y LA durante 16 años. No creo que el ayuntamiento deba aprobar este proyecto. Gracias.
Good evening. My name is Aura Garcia, and I have worked at the 4 Points by Sheraton LAX Hotel for 16 years. I do not think that the City Council should approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Aura. Who is our next speaker?
Our next speaker would be Yasina Delgado, but I don't see her in the meeting. We'll try moving on to Yahira Zelaya, if she's here.
Yahira, are you in the move?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Shahida Reyes. I have worked at Hotel Figueroa for 2 years now. I do not agree with this project. Please do not move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yahira.
Our next speaker is Mildred Flores.
Hello, Mildred, are you in the room?
Jose, if you could maybe translate, I do see Mildred in the room.
Mildred, si por favor puede quitar su modo de mudo para que pueda hablar, por favor. Mildred.
Hello? Yes?
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Mildred Flores, and I have worked at JW Marriott LA Life for 11 years. I do not agree with the project. Please do not move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mildred.
Our next speaker would be Teresa Sanchez, but I don't see her in the meeting, so we'll move on to Maria del Carmen Trujillo.
Hi, Maria. Are you available?
Maria, if you could unmute, she may need translation.
María, si puede quitarse de mudo, por favor, para que pueda hablar. María del Carmen Trujillo, si puede quitarse del mudo para que pueda participar.
Okay, for now we can try to move on to Cecilia Alvarado.
Hello, Cecilia. Are you available?
Buenas noches.
We hear you.
Mi nombre es Cecilia Alvarado y he trabajado en el Hotel Holiday Inn LAX por 22 años. No estoy de acuerdo con este proyecto. Por favor, no sigan adelante con esto. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Alvarado, and I have worked at the Holiday Inn Hotel for 22 years. I do not agree with this project. Please do not move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Our next speaker is Freda Natzmer.
Hello, Freda. Are you here in the room?
Freda, if you press *6, you'll unmute.
Freida, si puede apretar estrella 6 para que pueda hablar, por favor. Freida.
¿Escucha? ¿Se escucha mi nombre?
Sí, se le escucha.
¿Aló?
Sí,
Ya,
puede
buenas noches. Mi nombre es Freida Nasmet. Trabajo en el Hotel Sheraton Headway, Los Ángeles, por 14 años. No estoy de acuerdo con lo que quieren resolver en este momento. Estoy en contra. Mi decisión es no, por favor.
Good evening. My name is Freida Natzmer, and I have worked at the Sheraton Gateway for 14 years. I do not agree with this project. Please do not move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mayor Grisanti, we have had one late sign up since this item was called. Would you like to hear their comment?
Sure.
Okay, we'll hear from Joe Drummond next.
Hello, Joe.
Hi, I just wanted to say, as a Malibu resident concerned for the future of Malibu's environment, especially with what I just discussed in public comment, and with 100 rooms and septic and all of this water going into, all of this effluent going into the ground, that a CEQA review really should have been done for this project before it was approved. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. But this is not a 100-room hotel. All right.
Mayor Grisanti, I've checked for the other people we missed earlier. The only one still in the meeting is Maria. Would you like us to try and hear from her one more time?
Give Maria one last chance. Maria, are you there?
Yes. Buenas noches, mi nombre es María del Carmen Trujillo. Yo trabajo para hoteles por 25 años. Estoy en total desacuerdo en el proyecto que ustedes quieren implementar, ya que afecta a la industria hotelera. Gracias, buenas noches.
Good evening. My name is Maria del Carmen Trujillo. I work in the hotel industry for 25 years, and I oppose to this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mayor Grisanti, we do have six raised hands now from people I don't have speaker signups for. Would you like to hear their comments?
I would not like to hear their comments. The rules are very clear that they must sign up in advance.
Then that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you very much. Bruce, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Paul. So I just want to say, I asked people to make their comments short, and they did. But Norm spoke for 2 minutes and tried to pile on 2 new things. And I'm offended by that. The 7 parking spaces, that was specifically discussed 2 meetings ago. The request was if Norm could get the 7 parking spaces, he could make an application to expand the restaurant. And that was what we voted on that night and became part of this agreement. It was not that he can rejigger the other parking spaces. That's just not what was done. There was specific discussion of that. The other is all plans show 9 spaces. If they do, that's news to me. I thought my recollection, and I could be mistaken, but my recollection was that there were 11 when it was presented to us. And I then spoke with members of planning staff and learned that there were actually 14 employees who would be at the site at one time. And they said that the 11 was a mistake and raised it to 14. I think I had that conversation with Adrian. I don't know where the 15th came from, but Coastal didn't increase anything from 9 to 15. This is inaccurate. So I mean, we're going to vote 3-1 tonight in favor of this, I suspect. But it bothers me that as I had asked the people opposed to this to hold their comments, and really no need to oppose it again tonight because it's already been approved basically, for Norm to now come here and ask for basically 2 new things in the guise of saying those are clarifications. He's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Was that a motion to approve as it was originally presented?
Sure.
I'll second that motion. Kelsey, would you be kind enough to call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I vote against the amendment.
Understood. Mayor Grisanti?
I vote in favor of the amendment.
Councilmember Fair?
I'm sorry. I vote in favor of the item.
Yeah.
Not in favor of. I vote in favor of the agenda. I'm sorry.
In favor of the recommended action?
Yes.
Councilmember Fair?
Okay, that's what we're voting on here.
Yes.
Yes, okay, yes. My vote is yes.
Councilmember Euring?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I believe that takes us to item 3B6, which I believe was pulled by a member of the public. Is that correct?
Yes, we have David Crawford here to speak on that item.
Mr. Crawford,
Good
are you
evening.
available?
Yeah, for those of you who have not met me or know who I am, I've been your city biologist for the last 20 years. And now that I'm getting old and feeble, I'm going to pass the baton on to Ms. Courtney McCammon, who's been my assistant for the last year, and I think will do a great job. And to ease the transition, I'm going to be her assistant. And I just hope that you guys are as good to her as you've been to me for the last 20 years, and that's it.
Thank you for taking the time to introduce her. Okay. Do we have any other comments from members of the council? Bruce?
I just have a question, which is, do David or Courtney do work for developers either in Malibu or outside of Malibu who come to us for environmental review from time to time?
David, can you answer that question, please?
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. No, I do not. I do work for developers elsewhere in LA County, but none that would come to Malibu. Courtney used to, but she quit doing them at least 4 or 5 months before she started helping me out.
Okay. And what about the consultants and representatives who work for those developers that you work for? Do they also work for people that are seeking applications in Malibu?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Can we have a motion to approve item 3B6?
I so move.
I'll second that motion. Kelsey, will you be kind enough to take the roll?
Councilmember Farrer,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next, we have item number 3B7, and I think that was yours, Steve. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I have, okay, you ready? I have no problem approving the contract with the consultant. When I looked at the scope of work, it appears to be pretty much a maintenance deal. We're maintaining the existing software products that we have. And I guess my question is anybody in the city, do we have anybody that's sort of looking over the horizon a little bit, saying, what do we want to be when we grow up? I've talked to residents who say, we've got helicopters flying up on Mars, and people say, what I'd like to be able to do is when I submit my project to the city, I'd like to be able to hit a button and be able to track where it goes through the city, who's doing what with it. And that seems to me to be a direction we'd like to head. We're not going to get there tonight, but somebody should be thinking about that. And I believe there are packaged solutions out there that may help us get there quicker than trying to build it from scratch. So this is more just, let's think ahead. Somebody should be doing that. And hopefully somewhere in the near future, we can sit back down and say, how do we sort of take a look at the infrastructure we have, make it more effective for the time that we're living in, and make the residents a little happier in terms of dealing with the service we're providing them. So other than that, I'll move to approve the item.
Okay.
Unless Lisa wants to say something. Her hand is up.
I'm sure she does. Lisa?
Thank you for bringing this up. And indeed, this is maintenance. Iris Consulting has been providing service to the city for a very long time. And the reason we're extending this is because we are in the process of looking for a new land management software. We've actually begun that. We also see that there would be, in transitioning to something new and doing that implementation, there would be, I think, some work that Iris Consulting could help us do to do that transition. So we are absolutely looking at that. We've started the process of reaching out to our IT consultants to begin that RFP process to look for one of these software solutions. And I've been working with the departments to do so. So it is on our radar. That's why we're asking for this 1-year extension in this particular agreement, because we know it is not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take us a little bit of time to find the software we like, set it up for success, and migrate all of our platforms to it. So yes, it's our goal this year to move that forward.
Thank you, Lisa.
One question, Lisa, is has somebody defined what it is we're trying to do? I mean, has somebody got a schematic or a document that says, here's what we want this thing to be when we get it to the end? Is that?
So that is why we're looking at using SDI Presence is the company that the city had retained to do its IT strategic plan before before the fire, before COVID. And part of that was to help us define exactly, to sort of do the RFP, map out exactly that. So the benefit of having them is that they can speak with each of the department heads who use this to do their permitting, right? So they can talk to Yolanda, they can talk to Rob, they can talk to Richard, and they can translate that into the RFP, into what we're looking at. And they, right now, our specific consultant and project manager with SDI is doing several of these procurements for other cities. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel and speak that language. We're using them to help craft what that plan is. And they do this all the time. They do this for other cities. They know what's out on the marketplace. So that's the goal.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
I just want to take a second to say that at League of Cities, there were many, many vendors of various kinds there. And I went around there hoping to find that golden ticket, somebody who already has a program that's ready to go and lots of experience. And if they were there, I didn't find them. I found people who were in the process of designing things and things like that. And I guess we have to come to grips with the fact that this kind of software is not a mass market product. It tends to be fairly custom. So, and that's why we have so many vendors involved with our current digital solutions. So, so we have a first and a motion and a second. So, Kelsey, can we call the roll, please?
I'm sorry, Mayor Grisanti, I missed the second.
Well, then I must have made it.
Okay. Councilmember Euring?
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti?
Yes.
Councilmember Fair?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. I believe 3B8 was a member of the public. Is that correct?
Yes, we have 2 speakers on this item. They are Scott Gillen and Don Schmitz. We'll hear from Scott first.
Thank you. Scott, are you in the room?
I am in the room. Thank you very much. Don will be speaking on my behalf.
Okay. Don, are you in the room?
Yes, sir, I am. And if it's just Mr. Golan and myself, I want to apologize to the council. We tried to convey to the staff that we were here to answer questions. We understand that this is not a de novo hearing. It is a revised resolution that the council directed staff to bring back. We have reviewed the transcripts from the hearing. We've reviewed the findings of the staff report, especially as it is reflected on section 3 of the revised resolution. We believe it does accurately reflect the actions taken by the council. So again, council members, I apologize. Certainly Mr. Gillen and I did not want to pull this matter, and we did not mean to clog up your usually busy agenda. So I am available for any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Don. I see Bruce has his hand raised.
Thank you, Paul. So, Don, no need to apologize because I was going to pull this one if you hadn't. Section 3, findings 1 and 2 are not consistent with what we concluded as a council, or at least not what I recall. I had provided a markup of those 2 paragraphs that I thought accurately reflected what we did, because we did have, there you go. So I'd like to propose those changes, and with those changes made, I would vote to support this resolution. Otherwise, I don't think it accurately reflects what we did. And I sent that 2 weeks ago. I mean, this isn't, or a week ago. This isn't something I just did at the last second. I don't know why it wasn't in the agenda.
I would guess that the reason it wasn't in the agenda is that these changes weren't made at the meeting.
There was no resolution. We voted to later redo the resolution to be consistent with our meeting vote and discussion. And then I conferred with the city's attorney, or the deputy attorney, made these proposals, which I think do accurately reflect what occurred at the meeting. And this is now the first time I'm actually seeing them put before us.
Mayor Grisanti, members of the council, again, good evening. If I could jump in, I know I did raise the hand feature, but Mr. Russin and Mr. Silverstein did work on some changes, and I think the changes that Mr. Russin was comfortable with have been incorporated in the version that's before the council tonight. I don't think any other changes were, at least according to Mr. Russin, consistent with the council's direction. That's not to say that they couldn't be revisited. I know Councilmember Pearson is not here, so if it's I'll leave it at that. My understanding is that the changes that Mr. Russin was comfortable making have been incorporated into this resolution in sections 1 and 2. I know that he did work extensively with Councilmember Silverstein, and that discussion was had. So just want to make the council aware.
Thank you very much. I guess Bruce, your hand is still raised?
Yeah, you know, Trevor may have a different understanding, or may have communicated something different to John, or there might have gotten something lost in the translation. The draft that's before us was what Trevor sent to me and asked, is this acceptable to you? And I did send him back something different. So maybe the answer is nothing I sent back was acceptable to him. But I think what John's recounting, which I have no doubt is truthful and honest and accurate to the best of his understanding, is not consistent with my recollection of what occurred. And Steve voted against this completely. I'm going to vote against this version if it doesn't get fixed. So we might have to wait for Mikey to come back and see if he votes against the 2 of us. I don't know, but or we can agree to the changes and we'll get this passed 3-1 tonight.
I'm uncomfortable with the fact that the owner of the property hasn't had a chance to see this ahead of time, and I think probably it is wisest to put this off until Mikey returns to the next meeting. How do we go about doing that, John? We don't have to renotice it. Can we adjourn it to the next meeting? How do we do that?
Yes, you would simply continue this item to your next regularly scheduled meeting.
Can I suggest letting them read it? My guess is they're going to have no opposition to it. It doesn't change the conclusion for them. It just reflects the fact that we were divided on the rationale.
Bruce, I'm a little uncomfortable with this for a reason that has nothing to do with you. It goes all the way back to when I was on the General Plan Task Force, and I took the minutes for the first 24 meetings of the General Plan Task Force, which were promptly approved after each meeting, at the next meeting by the people who were actually on the task force. A year later, I was rather surprised when someone came in with a new set of minutes that they tried to insert as substitutes for the minutes that had actually been approved by the people who were there. And I really don't believe I believe that the time to craft what you want said with the staff is before the meeting, not after the meeting. And I'm not, so I would like to put this off and deal with it when Mike has returned, because I don't know what is the, John, what is the effect of a 2-2 vote?
That motion would fail for lack of a quorum.
Okay. So then we would need to, Karen?
Yeah, I'd like to just move to continue this to the next meeting.
I'll second that. Kelsey, can we have a vote on continuing this to the next meeting?
Councilmember Fair,
Excuse me, yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Sure.
Okay,
motion carries.
moving right along. That takes us to 3B9, which I think is one of Steve's. Is that correct?
Yeah, and this, again, I've got no problem with this. I just want to congratulate the Homeless Task Force. Kelly Presses and Ian Roven, I think, were the two people who took the effort to construct this thing. And I'm just happy to see it took the city council a couple of months to get to the point where they're working well together. The Homeless Task Force has, I think, made some strides, put together a document they all agreed to. So I want to congratulate them for doing that. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 9.
I'd like to second that motion. Kelsey, will you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to 4A, which has been continued. And that takes us to 4B, which has also been continued. And that takes us all the way, I don't believe there's any 5s at all, so that takes us to 6A. Is there a staff report?
Yes. Yes. Good evening, council, mayor and council. This particular item regarding our community wildfire protection plan, I'm going to actually hand this over to our fire safety liaison, Chris Broussard. Chris, are you there?
I am. Good evening.
Good.
So I have a quick PowerPoint presentation for you. It should be up on the screen now. So City of Malibu Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Next slide, please. What is a community wildfire protection plan? Defined in the United States Congress Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, the goal of the CWPP is to enhance efforts to protect communities, human life, infrastructure, watershed, and other risks from catastrophic wildfire. A CWPP is a community-based plan focused on addressing local hazards and risks from wildfire. A CWPP determines what is at risk and provides a roadmap for any actions for a community to address the wildfire threat. Next slide, please. What are the requirements of a CWPP? The Healthy Forest Restoration Act defines the 3 requirements for CWPP is collaboration, collaboratively developed with input from a very large stakeholders, including but not limited to community members, nonprofits, and other group of local agencies, state and federal. Prioritizing fuels reduction, identifies areas for hazardous fuels reduction, and recommends treatments. Recommendations, measures to reduce structural ignitability in communities to risk from wildfire, and describes modifications to buildings that can reduce the chances of them catching fire. Next. So the CWPP timeline. In June of 2019, the city was awarded a $100,000 grant from CAL FIRE for the creation of the Malibu Community Wildfire Protection Plan. In November of 2019, the city contracted with Jensen Hughes for the request for proposal process. In February through April, the city conducted public outreach and stakeholder workshops. We also did an online survey that was completed by 225 residents. March of 2021, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan the draft was released, and again, public input was provided. And in August of 2021, the Public Safety Commission voted to unanimously recommend the City Council adopt the CWPP. So, benefits of having a CWPP. Next slide, please. CWPP assesses the wildfire risk to a community. It helps communities identify values and assets and how to enhance protection to those assets in case of a wildfire. The CWPP will guide the city in prioritizing projects where the city can take action to reduce the wildfire threat in ways that are reasonable and acceptable in the community way of life. An important outcome of the CWPP process is to build effective working relationships between the agencies and the stakeholders. A CWPP identifies community-level projects, vegetation clearing, evacuation routes, chipping programs, and plans for hazardous reduction around the community. Projects identified in the CWPP are more likely to receive grant funding from state, local, and federal sources. Next slide, please. So, how will recommendations in the CWPP be carried out? Next slide. CWPP recommendations. Table 15 consists of action items that are applicable on a community-wide basis. They focus on tasks such as developing partnerships, improving communications through public education and code enforcement. Next slide. Next slide. Table 16 contains site-specific actions which have been identified for 3 specific geographical areas. These areas were identified using Los Angeles County Fire Department 13 structural defense maps for the city of Malibu. These maps are designed for field-going personnel and are targeted as a comprehensive source of structure defense information. Firefighting resources use these tactical maps when in an area. The consultant used these maps and consolidated it down into 3 general areas: Western Malibu, Central Malibu, and Eastern Malibu. Next slide. So CWPP recommendations that are being implemented: continuing home ignition zone assessments throughout Malibu and the surrounding communities, establishing community chipping events, the removal of dead, damaged, and fire weakened trees throughout the city of Malibu, connecting with existing fire safe councils to better understand the local needs, working with Caltrans county roads to maintain and brush the roads to improve evacuation and better traffic flow and improve visibility during wildfires, work with county fire and sheriffs to determine the viability of neighborhood brigades, provide community training on wildfire preparedness, and continued coordination efforts with all public agencies and private interest groups that are involved in the Santa Monica Mountain region to foster and maintain a unified, comprehensive, and strategic wildfire hazardous reduction plan as established in the Santa Monica Mountains CWPP, which was established in 2007. Next slide. Future recommendations to implement. So reviewing and updating the Los Angeles County Fire Department's tactical maps, continue to seek additional grant funding, continue to develop fuel treatment strategies throughout the community, continuing with our public education and home hardening, and the posting of evacuation signs throughout the community of Malibu. Next slide, please. And finally, you have CWPP monitoring. The CWPP is intended to provide a foundation for continued multi-agency collaboration and cooperation for fire protection planning efforts within the city. Effective monitoring of wildfire planning efforts provide important opportunities to evaluate the overall success of the CWPP in reducing wildfire risk and improving the planning process. This plan does not end when it's adopted, but it evolves on a continuous cycle of collaborative planning, implementation, monitoring, and adapting strategies based upon our lessons learned. Next slide. Any questions?
Very impressive document, Chris.
Thank you. Sorry, I sounded got a little head cold going on.
Well, take care of yourself. We need you healthy.
Mayor
Okay.
Grisanti, are you ready for public comment?
I am ready for public comment, and I see Steve McClary has his hand up.
If I could, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to note when we have a couple of minor corrections in the actual CWPP, I could go over those for the record very quickly. On page 39, we need to make reference on the wastewater treatment to note that the city does operate the city center treatment plant. That's one correction. Also, we need to make an adjustment to the table on page 68 of the report. There are some incorrect numbers there in terms of lost homes, so we'll be making those changes if council concurs. Also, there is some description on page 111 in the report regarding the pulse point that is incomplete. We'd like to add some additional language to that. We don't think any of it changes any of the substance of the report. And if we could get council's concurrence with those changes, we'd like to incorporate them as part of the record this evening. Secondly, I'd also ask if the city attorney could comment. We had received some questions from council members in the public regarding the applicability of SB 10 as potentially coming into play here if the city were to adopt this plan. I'd like to ask Mr. Cotty if he could comment on the applicability of SB 10 here.
Yes.
Mr. Cotty, are you available?
I am. Again, good evening. As you know, SB 10 was recently adopted and signed into law, I believe, as of about a week ago, as a matter of fact. And that law allows the city council to adopt an ordinance to essentially upzone city property to upzone private property for up to 10 units to increase development potential of that site. SB 10 specifically carves out properties that are in a very high fire hazard severity zone. I would note, though, that there is a carve out in that section that says that this paragraph does not apply to sites that have adopted fire hazard mitigation measures pursuant to existing building standards or state fire mitigation measures applicable to the development. And a member of the community has raised a concern that, well, if you adopt this CWPP plan, you could essentially negate that exception to the very high fire hazard severity zone exception to SB 10. And I would note that would not be the case. The CWPP plan is not the type of plan that's embodied in section 4A, that talks about site-specific fire mitigation plans and development-specific fire mitigation plans. The plan that's before you tonight is not that type of plan. It is not. It does not rise to the level of a site-specific or development-specific plan, and therefore would not impact the applicability of Section 4A related to very high fire hazard severity zones and their carve-out from SB 10. I'm happy to answer any questions on that point if the council would like.
Thank you, John.
I think you're safe.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John and Steve. Do we have members of the public to comment?
Yes, you have one speaker on this item, Pat Healy.
Pat, are you available?
Pat, you should see a pop-up asking you to unmute.
Okay. Well, I was the one that raised this question, but I think your attorney says it's not a problem. But I would still feel more comfortable if you waited. Already so many of the suggestions we've heard are being implemented, and you're going to continue to do certain things without actually adopting the fire plan. So I personally would feel more comfortable if you just waited till everything in 9 and 10 was better understood. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I see Chris Broussard's hand is raised.
I just wanted to let you know that I reached out to the consultant today to try to get some clarification on that what Steve was talking about today. So on one of the tables were missing some information, and they quoted their source was from CAL FIRE. So I was just trying to get some clarification on that. We would have given them the information early on in the CWPP about the waste treatment water facility. So that's getting addressed. And then to touch on the pulse point, the description in the CWPP is what pulse point was when it was originally introduced. Pulse point originally was used for notifying the public of a medical emergency. So those that were trained in CPR could render aid to the general public if they were in the vicinity. So in the description, it just references the life safety component of pulse point and not the actual situational awareness component, where now you can get alerts for vegetation fires and vehicle fires. So those are all easy fixes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was drinking a cup of water when Steve jumped on there. Thank you for that, sir.
Appreciate it. Okay, Bruce, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so I agree with Pat Healy that we ought to be a little prudent and wait a little bit to get some more clarity on SB 10. I appreciate what John had to say. My concern is the last sentence, which is the carve out from the exception. So the exception is if you're a very high fire hazard severity zone, the new act doesn't apply, does not apply, but it still does apply if. And the language is, this paragraph does not apply to sites that have adopted fire hazard mitigation measures pursuant to existing building standards or state fire mitigation measures applicable to the development. I don't know what the word site means in that statute, which is a brand new statute, because it's not defined. And they talk about area parcels located in a very high fire hazard severity zone. It's unclear to me whether the site means the area of the city that's designated as that term applies, which is all of Malibu, or whether it means only a particular parcel on which development is going to occur, which would have been easy enough words to use. So I don't know what the statute means, and I would think we would want to not facilitate SB 10 applying here if we don't have to facilitate it. So I think Pat's caution is well heeded, and I'm going to vote that we not adopt this tonight. And she's also right in saying we're doing all these things anyway. It's not like adopting this document is going to cause us to change our direction. So that's where I stand on this.
I just want to say I've discussed this with our lobbyist, who assured me that the carve out remains intact for things that are subject to the Coastal Act. And being in a very fire high severity is just icing on the cake. So, but I see Steve has raised his hand. Steve?
It's just, I mean, what is the downside of delaying this for a little bit of time? Is there any impact in doing that?
We just have to agendize it again and print out 175 pages and send it out to the council again and tell them that we've got 17 more attorneys who agree that we don't have to do this. You know, that it's okay to pass it. But in the meantime, we're much less likely to get a grant because we don't have a plan to show, which is something that the state of California likes. Basically a plan that shows this. Steve, I see your hand is raised.
Not to steer the conversation in any way, but I just wanted to be clear for the record, if we were to delay this for a couple of weeks, it would not have any impact on the city obtaining or using the grant funds.
Okay. So, Steve, would you like to make a motion to adjourn this to 2 weeks hence?
I would like to do that, yes.
I'll second that.
But, well, let me ask a question. Do we think we'll have more clarity in 2 weeks?
I think that if you search online and talk to, all the cities have people who are writing articles about how this is going to affect them, and their attorneys about how it's going to affect them. And I think I think that there's a flood of information coming to us, and I personally am very comfortable with it. But I think that probably the volume of material will rise to meet your satisfaction.
Yeah,
Mayor Grisanti.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilman Muring, I was just saying I'm happy to put together a report that addresses some of those concerns. I see this concern is not, as Councilmember Silverstein said, not unwarranted given the amount of housing legislation that has been passed recently by our state. So I'm happy to put together a council report that you guys can discuss at your next meeting.
Okay, I just think being careful. This is a big deal. I mean, if we screw it up, so I'm sorry. That's all I got.
All right, that's good. I see Bruce's hand is raised.
Well, just to go the other direction, John, how confident are you? Where's your level of confidence that if we adopt this, we don't in any way, shape, or form trigger that last sentence of SB 10?
Well, I'm fairly confident because there's a prerequisite in SB 10. The council would have to adopt an ordinance authorizing the upzoning of parcels. And you haven't done that. And I don't suspect, given your opposition to SB 10 in the first instance, you would be doing that. So you don't have an SB 10 ordinance on the books that would allow the upzoning in the first place. And therefore, the carve out for very high fire hazard severity zones, we wouldn't even get there.
Is that the only, I thought there was other things that SB 10 did by default that the VHFHSZ designation prevents from being in place. Am I wrong about that?
Well, the thrust of SB 10 is to allow local government to pass an ordinance authorizing upzoning. It also, for cities that have, we'll call them slow growth type ordinances, it allows the council to adopt by a 2/3 vote, essentially an ordinance overriding that voter approved initiative, which is.
So unlike SB 9, SB 10 doesn't remove any of the protections of local laws that exist right now?
No, this SB 10 allows but does not mandate that you adopt an ordinance.
Okay, I didn't appreciate that. So Paul, if you want to get this done tonight with that,
I would love to.
I'll go ahead and support it.
Thank you.
Want to withdraw your motion to continue it?
I would like no. I'm gonna withdraw my motion to continue this. And is there a substitute motion? I see Bruce's hand raised.
Oh, that's a relic from before. I'm going to support it, but I'm not going to move to support it.
Did I misunderstand what you were saying? You were comfortable with it, or you were comfortable with putting it off for 2 weeks?
You are correct in understanding that I'm comfortable voting in support of it, but I'm not comfortable moving to do that. So if you'd like to move it, I'll vote for it.
Okay, I'd like to move that we go ahead and pass the recommended item on item 6A.
I will second that, and I would like to thank Chris Brossard for all the work that went into this.
Okay, Kelsey, will you be kind enough to take the roll?
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 6B, public speaker time deferrals. And do we have a staff report?
I don't have too much of a staff report for you, Mayor Grisanti. When the City Council transitioned to virtual meetings due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we did try to get meetings up and running as quickly as possible and minimize the variables that could cause us some bumps along the road. And our virtual meeting platform, PrimeGov, has been unable to support a form for time deferral signups, which has been the biggest roadblock. So introducing this would create some technical and logistical challenges, but that's of course up to the council to decide how you want to tackle it.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this?
Yes, we have two speakers. They are Pat Healy and Ryan. We'll hear from Pat first.
Thank you. Pat, are you available?
Yes, I just want to say I think it's a good idea to allow speakers to get more time by people offering their time and giving up their right to speak. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Ryan, are you available?
Yes, I wanted to comment that, as I say, necessity is the mother of invention. The action I think you're being asked to take may not technically be needed, because I don't think the council acted to reduce the public input policy that it's had for 20 years. And so, although it formalizes to some degree the extent of the past actions of cutting off the consolidation of time that's been occurring, there have been many instances of both the City Council and Planning Commission and some of these big hearings that you just had, where consolidation of time probably would have had the meeting ending sooner, but you cut off people and their topics that were not heard. So I think it's very important that you restore this through some type of a software correction if that's necessary. But the curtailment, oddly, was not a formal act of the council that I'm aware of at all, and I attend almost every meeting. So please restore the consolidation of time concept, because it is a 1/3 allocation of time. It does not triple the time. And a lot of times we've seen a better result in shorter meetings because of it. And lastly, the Planning Commission under Chair Jennings, who's an attorney and also a 2-term council member, they were successfully able to implement the consolidation of time. It takes a little trickier staff coordination to do that, but they were able to and prove that it was possible. I still think you should put your pressure on any PrimeGov software people to make it easier on staff, but it needs to be implemented. So please, I say you could support this as a directive, but I believe the city never deviated from the policy that it currently has had, and yet just was not being implemented. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Bruce, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. So yeah, I agree with both of the speakers. I'm going to move for discussion purposes that we go back to allowing time sharing or time donation. We have a lot of items where there are large groups of members of the public who would easily donate their time to one main speaker. So instead of having 5 speakers that just go one after another, 2 to 3 minutes each and going 10 to 15 minutes, we could have one main speaker who took 8 minutes and would more eloquently, more cogently, more summarize the position and get it out there. And as Ryan says, this is the way it's been done for the longest time, and it was just unilaterally changed by not by City Council when we went to the Zoom meetings. So I think we've been acting improperly, not allowing donation of time for the past year or more, and it's time to set that straight and start doing so. So I move that we get back to doing that.
Thank you, Bruce. Karen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, according to the report, the issue is with technological limitations of the system that the city's using. So obviously that was not a vote by the council, and we're limited with the current technology that we're using. I don't know if we should be looking at another source, but that's not what's before us right now. And according to the staff report, there is a difficulty in this system logistically. So I think we've been okay doing this way since we started, and that was whatever that was, 16 months ago. I think obviously as soon as we go back to in-person meetings, we will go back to our previous system. That's my comment.
Thank you, Karen. Is anybody going to second Bruce's motion? I say the motion dies for lack of a second, Bruce. Thank you. More discussion?
I will move to maintain the current system and look forward to the previous system when we go back to in-person meetings.
Bruce, is that our motion to second?
No, it's a comment on the motion.
Okay.
Just briefly.
I'll second it for discussion's sake then.
Sure. And I know where the vote's going to go. I just want to say it's beyond credibility that we can't do this technologically. The city clerk knows exactly who's on the Zoom call. If up to four people wrote an email and said, I'm donating my time, it's an easy enough thing to see who's on here and to give and to increase the time for the person who's speaking. We increase time for people that are speaking and decrease time for people who are speaking all the time. So I just don't get the technological issue. I think that's a red herring.
Thank you, Bruce. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to approve Karen's motion. I just don't think we want, look, doing this stuff online is difficult enough for the staff. I don't think I want to make their life any more difficult. And we're moving toward the part of getting the meetings back to being live. I mean, that's not that far over the horizon. So I think we've lived with it this long. I go a little bit longer and not try and make a change at this point in time.
All right. Kelsey, can we call the roll, please?
Councilmember Fair?
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti?
Yes.
Councilmember Euring?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein?
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to item 6C. Do we have a staff report?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. If I may please have my PowerPoint presentation. What we have before you this evening is a zone text amendment initiation regarding the dark skies ordinance. And the primary reason for this is the compliance periods that were required by the ordinance that's currently in effect. If I may have my next slide, please. On this slide, we have the proposed amendments as well as the existing ordinance. So under the existing ordinance, there was a grandfathering period set for gas stations, commercial lighting, and then residential lighting. The gas station lighting was required to be brought into compliance on October 15th, 2019. And the city did start that process. And there is an update of where we are with the 6 gas stations contained within your agenda report. And we are currently reviewing those. One has been approved, and we expect by the beginning of next month, the installation will begin on the lighting that was approved, and that's for the Chevron station that is on the ocean side of Pacific Coast Highway and Webb Way. For the other gas stations, as we mentioned in our staff report, with that, we have worked with Jim Benya and his consulting firm to receive his experience on it and advice to review the applications that we do have, because we have applications that, one, we want to make certain that the lighting is going to achieve the goals, and two, on some of those applications, the gas station designers lighting designers are requesting that we grant them a deviation in a process that goes before the city's planning commission. And so the idea is to have Mr. Benya opine on those and see if the deviation is one necessary, and if it is it warranted? But looking forward, we have the issue of commercial lighting, which was to be brought into compliance last year. That was removed due to budget issues from our work plan. And then also upcoming this year is the deadline for outdoor lighting in residential and institutional zoning districts. That deadline is October 15th, 2021. So what we're here for as staff is to receive direction from the council. We can go one of two ways. If the council likes what they see in front of them tonight or wants to tweak it, they could give us direction at this meeting. And then from there, we'll draft an ordinance, take it to the planning commission, And then after a recommendation by the Planning Commission, it would come back to the council. Or if it's the council's pleasure, we could take this matter up with Zoraces, have Zoraces provide direction to staff. Then we would prepare the amendment to take it before the Planning Commission and then to the City Council. So whichever the council would like to do this evening, what staff at this time is recommending is that we push out commercial zoning until October 15th, 2022, and then the following year for residential and institutional. And what would take place if this goes forward is that what we would start looking at is working towards a process to get a consultant that would help with the outreach and education needed to first approach the commercial businesses, landowners, and explain what is needed and what's going to be expected. And then next, after that outreach process, there would then be the outreach for residential and institutional zoning districts. I'm available for any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have any members of the public?
Yes, we have 3 speakers for this item. They are Pat Healy, Cami Winikoff, and Ryan. We'll hear from Pat Healy first.
Hi, Pat.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I just, speaking for the Malibu Coalition for Slow Growth, and we would like to propose some changes. One, the commercial implementation be delayed for 1 year only. Residential implementation be delayed for 1 year only, not 2. Staff begins to outreach to the commercial establishments and residents now, notifying them in easy to understand terms what the regulations are and how to comply. Outreach should be positive in nature and continual, so everybody is on board when the implementation date arrives. Jim Benya should be hired to work with staff, residents, and commercial owners as needed in preparing for the implementation of the ordinance. It's important to direct staff now to include an amount in the appropriate year's budget for enforcement of the dark sky ordinance rather than waiting for it to be discussed as part of the fiscal year of 22-23. The ordinance has been thoroughly vetted over the years. It's no need to go back to Zoraces for further amendments. The council can decide tonight on the extension dates. And, you know, residents have been waiting for this dark sky ordinance each year with more development where the dark sky is being eroded. We no longer see the evening stars. And also many animals and insects need the dark sky for their survival. So we would hopefully wish that you consider our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Cami, are you in the room? Cami?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. The Malibu Community Alliance sent a letter on this item that detailed the timeline for the dark sky ordinance that you can see started early in April of 2013, but the work started even earlier. So the staff suggestion that the ordinance go back into Zoraces is quite frankly absurd. The dates for compliance of this ordinance have already been pushed out a year due to COVID, but clearly staff needs to focus on getting the gas stations into compliance. If that means the commercial properties need to be pushed out another year, so be it. But residential deadlines should remain. In essence, the ordinance would be in full force and effect by October 2022. This seems reasonable, and it would be helpful for staff, possibly with the assistance from its expert consultant, or even using the IDA as a resource, to come up with a short, concise pamphlet or even a 2-page handout that can be given with the building permits for residential properties, particularly since we're in the process of so many Woolsey Fire rebuilds. As Pat said, the Malibu Coalition for Slow Growth advocates this position as well. And I just would like to thank you in advance for your support with this important community endorsed ordinance to protect our Malibu dark skies. Thank you.
Thank you, Cammie. Ryan, are you available?
Yes, I'm here. And I agree with the prior speakers, both. I think Cammie was quite generous in giving a whole year for the commercial gas stations, all half dozen of them, to start working on this because they've already had 3 years. The final reading of Ordinance 434 was in May 29th of 2018. They all knew about it. They were all solicited for public input and so forth. There were hearings. This has gone on for 5 years, and the gas stations are by far the worst offenders. So I would suggest giving them 6 months because Malibu is not the first dark skies community. All of these major gas stations have, consultants at their, they can call on to comply. The ordinance is quite specific. There's no need to have all these hearings for variances of the Planning Commission. This is just a blowback to comply or even start complying. So I'm a bit offended by giving away everything for another year. And I understand with a year from now, residential needing to be on board, but I think giving commercial an entire year to submit for this when they're already behind schedule is just going to consolidate the problems a year from now. And you should do a 6-month extension for commercial, get those out of your hair, get them done out of the way. And then we can concentrate the full resources of the city on the education outreach for the residential, which is by far, a lot more covered area and parcels. One of the main things is to stop residents from buying daylight, these blue light bulbs, and putting them outside, which is exactly contrary to the ordinance. So every day that goes by, more and more of that is happening, and you're going to have a bigger problem. So 1 year for residential extensions, 6 months for commercial extensions. And thank you very much for moving forward with the consultant, the expertise, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Steve, you got your hand up to be the first speaker from the council.
Sorry, I left it out from the last one, but okay, I'll take a shot at this. Quiet. Let me pass till I get my dog quiet. Give me one. Somebody else go first, please.
Does anybody else want to? Bruce, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so Richard said that there's 1 or 2 things we can do. That's not so. There are 3 things we can do. The option that was omitted was do nothing to the statute at all. I commented earlier about the dynamic of being a small town and how we have the ability to be responsive and responsible to our residents in ways that do not and cannot occur in most cities. The proposal tonight is not what our residents expect from our small town government. Businesses owned by non-residents are violating a law that was passed at the behest of our residents. The response proposed by staff is let's amend the statute to give them a pass for doing that. I oppose any amendment to the ordinance. We can grant extensions on a case-by-case basis if they're truly needed, not a blanket extension for everyone who may not need it. Doing so gives us greater leverage to enforce the law with respect to the scoff laws, because we'll be dealing with them when they're in violation of the law, not when they're coming up on an artificial deadline that they're going to know doesn't mean very much because it just gets extended when they fail to comply with it. And lastly, why should we have to budget a consultant to help them understand how to comply with the law? Let's charge them as part of the penalty for not complying with our law to pay for us to show them how to do it. They know how to do it. This is nonsense. They're just trying to get away with more time so that they can continue to be bright lights, bright beacons to people that need to buy gas. And there's no reason for us to be changing our law. Let's just enforce the law.
Thank you, Bruce. I will say that no one is recommending that we're changing the rules for the gas stations. I don't think staff recommended that. So, Steve, you're up.
Yeah, I want to go, and let's just deal with the gas stations. What is the deadline, the drop dead deadline for gas stations, Richard?
That deadline was October 15th, 2019, and that's
Right.
correct. That's not changing.
Now the deadline today is what? What is the deadline you guys are proposing for a gas station?
We're not proposing to change that. We're only talking about commercial development and residential and the institution.
Okay, so what are we going to do to get the gas stations to comply?
So we have all 6 gas stations have submitted applications.
Okay.
The one gas station had an issue, the one on PCH and Webb there, they had issues obtaining the dark skies compliant fixtures. What we were told was that there was manufacturing issues, things are slow with COVID. So we were provided actually FedEx tracking numbers so we could watch their shipment so that we would know when they're going to receive it. And that way we can stay on them to have it installed. And our understanding is that the light bulbs are getting delivered at the end of this month, beginning of next month, and they'll be doing that work in October. The other gas stations, we have 3 that have requested for deviations. And the deviation request is something that is contained in the current dark skies ordinance. There is different levels of these. If it's residential, that's something that could be handled at a director level unless the director wants to refer it to the planning commission. However, for the gas stations, those automatically go to the planning commission. And we have, as we mentioned in the report, we're working with Jim Benya to have him review those deviation requests. No one on staff, and Yolanda can also help us with this, is a dark skies lighting expert. That's going to be something that, one of the things actually should have come up in the discussions was that we needed to retain somebody as an expert in this field. That way we can meet the expectations of the public when this was passed. And so that's what we're doing right now. We have all the applications in from the gas stations. We'll have Mr. Benya review the 5 of them. However, they are all also code enforcement cases. We have issued them notices that they are out of compliance. And at this time, they are complying with us. It's now on the city, I should say, to have Mr. Benya provide us evidence of, is it valid what they're saying to us, and is it accurate on the plans what they are showing? Okay, so Jim Benya is on board? Yes. Okay, so let's go to these gas stations. What date are you, let's assume they're on, they got their plans in, Jim's going to take a look at them. What date are we saying you've got to be in compliance? You got to be done by when? What is the date? Do we have a date? We don't have a date. What I'm doing with the gas stations is I've instructed Doug that our standard practice with code enforcement compliance is that we give anyone a range from, say, 14 days to 45 days to comply. We're keeping these folks on a short leash, so I've been asking Doug to do 2 weeks so that if we ask for something, we expect that we get a reply. If it's plans or we need to know what's going on. Yes, if it's the council's wish, of course, we could hit them with a fine, but at this point, we're keeping them on a short leash to get the materials in. And once we can make some progress on that, they're going to have a 2-week window to get us a response and stay on it so that these don't linger, say, in the planning department for a couple of months or linger in Yolanda's department. Okay, but the question is, at some point in time, we're putting due dates on other commercial. These gas stations have, and you and I have been talking about gas stations now for 1.5 years or longer, all right? Okay. About trying to get them on board. And I think we've agreed up to this point in time, you got to go to them and say, this is your date. And if you're not done by this date, here's where the penalty comes in. I'm just trying to figure out what date you're looking at to make that happen.
I see Yolanda's hand raised. Maybe Yolanda can help us. Yolanda, will you unmute? Will somebody let Yolanda unmute? There we go.
Good evening, Council. Just just going back to what Richard stated, we have 6 gas stations going back to the time that they needed to be in compliance, October 15 of 2019. The 6 of them have gone through the planning process, and 3 of them under the building and safety process. The direction from council during COVID was, let's put it on hold because we have COVID. Now we're going back and revisiting all of them and reminding them the importance that they are really already out of compliance. So we are not extending the date. They are already out of compliance. The 3 of them are on plan check. 1 of them already have received permits. Under the building code, they have 180 days to call for an inspection. But knowing that the city has a ordinance in which they are already delinquent, code enforcement has been very active at calling them and asking them to be under compliance. As far as the 2 of the ones that are in plan check, the corrections were given to those applications in regard of the lighting trespassing limited. We had not only code enforcement, I called the engineers, and they're stating that they cannot make it work. Subsequently, we went into contract. We're working in the contract with this engineer, to help us out since he has the expertise to move it forward. Like Richard mentioned before, staff does not have expertise on lighting. I'm not a lighting engineer, nor I have in staff any lighting expertise. Having Engineer Peña on board, we facilitate with responses and enforcement of those corrections that were given to those property owners.
Let me make a suggestion. My suggestion is, if you want to get the commercial properties to comply, what you want to do is get the gas stations in compliance. And you want to do it in such a way that you go to the gas station and say, here's your drop dead date. If you're not done by that date, the fines go in. And you make that the rule of the Malibu, and you'll have the commercial properties jumping on board in a heartbeat. But you got to pick a date. You don't have a date for when you want the gas stations done. Is it end of October? End of November? When? Yolanda said they get another 180 days. That's too long.
Steve?
Yes.
There's something going on in the world right now. And part of the reason that we had our smog last week is I heard on the radio this morning, there's over 80 cargo carriers idling in Santa Monica Bay. We've got all sorts of products from overseas have been coming in and that are now on back order, and we can't handle them and unload them fast enough. And I think anything you've looked for doing home repairs, and Bruce, I know you're going to feel me on this one, there's a lot of stuff that's out of stock, and especially new high-tech stuff is out of stock. And we've got to, if someone's ordered stuff and it's on one of those ships that's idling in the harbor right now, there's not a whole lot.
But we don't know that's the case of anything we're talking about. We don't. That's an excuse, but we don't know if that is relevant to anybody that we're trying to get these gas stations compliant with. I'm just trying to look. I've talked to Richard now for 1.5 years on these gas stations, and I don't know how many times he's told me our compliance people are talking to him. We're communicating with them, and nothing's ever happened. It's time to set a date and because once you get the gas stations in, I've got people that work in some of the commercial properties. They're telling the people I'm talking to, they're not going to do buckus because the city has got no commitment to making this happen. So we have to demonstrate, one, to the residents it can be done, and we have to demonstrate to the commercial property owners that are coming up next that they're going to have to do it because we're going to be serious about making this work. That's all I'm trying to do.
Wow.
So I need a date.
I see Richard with his hand up.
I would prefer that we don't give a date to the gas stations. And the reason being is that as they are now, they're out of compliance, which allows me to use the hand of code enforcement. I'm concerned that if we give them a date of October 31st, they'll throw that in our face, flaunt it, and try to use that to their advantage. And at this point, as Yolanda mentioned, yes, a building permit's good for 180 days. However, they're in violation of the city's municipal code. And that's why Doug has gone after pretty sternly, and we were going to get them into a compliance agreement, the one gas station that we actually did issue building permits, because we said, yes, you're in good standing with building and safety, but you aren't with us. And we need to know where you are with these lights and getting them installed. So without a date, that keeps them in violation of the code, which, if they're not making any progress, gives us the ability then to say it's time for administrative citations. So I am very hopeful that with somebody like Mr. Benya, he can look at these gas stations, tell us if their plans are bogus or if they're valid, so that we can get started on issuing the approvals and permits. And then if we start to see that things aren't happening, then we're able to start utilizing administrative citations. So that would be my request to staff. I think Yolanda feels the same way. It helps us keep the pressure on these folks. And once we get through these guys, hopefully with what we learned from Mr. Benya, that'll help with our outreach, so we can then focus on getting a consultant for outreach and get started on commercial and how we address that. And then also look at code enforcement, so that I think that's another very serious thing for the city, because I believe that as a council, you have an expectation that we will have somebody who could go out there, look at the lighting, and figure out if there's light trespass. I mean, anybody can look and figure out if something's downward facing. That, I think we're all in agreement we could do that. But when there's things like light trespass and how many foot candles, I believe you're going to want somebody with expertise. And that is something else that I was discussing with the city manager and Yolanda. And we think that's another very important thing to get on board, because I know there are folks that are ready to turn in neighbors in 2 weeks, or a little over 2 weeks, I guess it is, to the 15th. But the truth is, we can obviously enforce lights off at 11:30. Once again, anybody could do that. But some of the light trespass issues, we really need to make sure that we have a code enforcement capability and a specialist that can do this at the level that the citizens want. I am concerned that we're not at that level.
Thank you, Richard.
Another item that I would like for you all to consider is the staffing and the work plan that we have in your direction. So that we are concentrated on the gas station. This is an item that I brought back on the finance in committee regarding staffing moving forward for the commercial and the residential. It's going to take more staffing to make sure that we have a successful program. And I'm grateful that we are having Benya joining us, so we can be more efficient and we can do a better job. But there's going to be a need for city staff to make sure that this program is successful, not only through the outreach, through the plan check, but it also through the enforcement.
Bruce, you're next, and then Karen.
Thank you, Paul. So, the shortage issue, the gas stations were supposed to be in compliance October 15, 2019. The world didn't know about COVID yet. Maybe some people in China knew, but no one else knew. We certainly didn't know here. There were no shortages. Shortages of this kind of thing didn't occur till way into 2020, if not later. I like what Richard said. As of now, they're non-compliant. I know we're not talking about the gas stations, but it's relevant. As of now, they're not compliant, and it gives the city the leverage of the hand of code enforcement. Same thing with commercial properties. Commercial properties are sitting there watching us disregard enforcement of the gas stations for 2 years now, going on further. Commercial was supposed to already be in line also. Some people may be having shortages. If they're having shortages and they can show the city that it's a genuine shortage and not just that they're just not doing it, then they can get a reasonable extension from the city and from code enforcement. But some people have adequate ability to do this and they're just not doing it. Richard said lights off at 11:30 is easy enough to do. Well, if you amend the dates, that's no longer the rule, I think. Maybe I misunderstand that, but you're giving a pass on things that can be done. So I don't understand why we're not just doing these on a case-by-case basis. We're not going to enforce against someone who obviously is incapable because of shortages and ships lined up out in the bay getting the supplies, but there's plenty of people that can get the supplies. Gas stations should have been in compliance 2 years ago. Let's get tough on them. And let's stop babying people who don't comply with the law by giving them extensions in the law itself. We can do this on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Bruce. Karen?
Okay, my comments have kind of shifted as this conversation's been going, but I would like to honor Richard's recommendation, but I also want to get some comments from the staff on the enforcement capacity. If the suggestion by Bruce is to do this case by case, can you comment on the capacity to do that? Yes, this has been dragging on a long time. I think everybody would agree on that. In the meantime, obviously, we had the Woolsey fire. Now we've had COVID, and that has had an impact, obviously, on city staff, and I assume on our local businesses. But yeah, we all want to see this just put to rest. So I'd like to just hear some comment on enforcement capacity right now and moving forward with this.
Our code enforcement officers, because in this last year, this number is going to seem wild, but it's what happened. We got approximately 600 cases turned into our code enforcement officers during the past year. And I have three officers, it's a staff of three. It's 2 officers and an enforcement manager who's also an officer. The gas stations have actually, I mean, with their regular job load, the gas stations have taxed them. It's been difficult for us. We are concerned, just looking forward at all the commercial development and the difficulties we're going to have there. We are going to be doing interviews soon to get another code enforcement officer. So yes, it is something to get to the expectation of the citizens. I do believe we're going to need, and Yolanda, I think, would also agree with this, probably somebody who can specialize in this and handle this because of the number of cases that are anticipated, and also just the knowledge so that this person can go out there firsthand and make recommendations. Or also, we need someone to be able to look at these engineers, because right now I'm getting reports from lighting engineers that are making claims, and it would be nice to have an engineer on staff, just like we do with geology, biology, coastal engineering. We have an engineer that could look at those comments and say, no, this is bogus. You could do this instead. So I think the code enforcement would be overwhelmed and we would be behind. I don't disagree with Councilmember Euring. This has been frustrating with just 6 gas stations. And I think that's an indication that we need to modify our practices and also just get somebody to focus on this.
Thank you, Richard. I see Steve McClary wants to make a comment.
Well, I think most of what I was going to say, Richard just said quite well. I just wanted to add to that, what this is this is staff trying to look at this point forward and trying to come up with a plan that we feel would get this done in the most expedient way, given our current resources. So just to echo Richard, we hear the concerns, we hear the frustrations. Again, I've been on board since May, and I've heard it brought up many times. So again, we're trying to find a way that we can move this forward in a way that makes sense. And I think I also just wanted to note, and I know this isn't really the main point here, but and Richard, correct me on this, but for new developments that are coming in, they do have to conform to the dark sky. and that won't change even if we were to defer these deadlines. Is that correct?
That is correct. So any application that's been approved from the planning department, it has the dark skies requirement attached to the project. What we're talking about tonight is not, as one of the members of the public brought up, somebody going out and buying a light bulb that's too bright. That's already prohibited. That has nothing to do with these deadlines. Lighting was required to start being compliant, anything new. Today, we're really focused on existing stuff that was approved prior or installed prior to the ordinance. I can tell you, I already had a discussion with the La Paz representative, the man who is in charge of the whole project. I don't want to say he's the owner, but he represents the interests of the group that owns La Paz. And I've already explained to him that this isn't up for discussion. Your lights will be dark skies compliant. And he's like, well, the Cross Creek Center is it? And I said, the Cross Creek Center is an existing development. You're not existing, you're new. And if you look at your approval from the city, it has a dark skies requirement. It's not negotiable. So yes, this is just focusing on existing prior to the amendment.
Thank you, Richard.
Our code, sorry.
Bruce, your hand is raised.
Yep. Well, first of all, bravo on the La Paz project, Richard. Stick to your guns. What do we need to do? Maybe John can answer this. What do we need to do to up the ante for the penalty for people that aren't complying and have them pay for us to be able to enforce? I mean, if we need more code enforcement, shouldn't the people that are causing us to have code enforcement have to pay for that code enforcement?
You can, customer service time, you can certainly increase your fines. We can bring back resolutions relating to how much fines are paid for administrative citations. What I'm hearing, though, is a function of staffing.
But if we have greater fines, we'd get more staffing, right?
Well, that's true.
We authorized, I think, 8 new positions in building and safety and planning, or maybe it was 6, as part of the plan for this year. And I know that it's been difficult to fill those spots. How far off am I, Yolanda? You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
No, I'm just here for the building and safety. There was no new positions added. The environmental programs, this actually was cut a position during COVID. So instead of 3 environmental program staff, I only have 2. So my staff is getting reduced and the workload is going up. So that's what I'm trying just to, I'm hearing that frustration, but I also would like to have priorities. If you can give me priorities on what should I concentrate my efforts with the staff that I'm being given. I understand code planning department is getting another code enforcement, another planning counter technician, and another administrative staff. But my staff is getting reduced.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to see the staff come back to us, or the city manager come back to us with a proposal to raise various fines or administrative fees, whatever it is John Cotty says we can do, on the areas where we're having the most trouble, so that we can actually bring more people in to start enforcing the law that's being disregarded, rather than giving people passes for disregarding the law. Let's make it cost money to disregard the law.
Not arguing. Okay. Does someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that'll probably fail for a second, but my motion is pass on this. Full stop. Law is the law. Let's leave it alone.
And Bruce, I don't have a problem with that, but are we going to give the staff focus that says we want you to go out and chase the commercial properties first?
That's not before us tonight. I'm just saying that we ought to not change the law, and we ought to, in a practical way, as best we can, address the situation going forward. And I understand you can't get blood from a stone. But
the hiring of Mr. Benya, I don't believe requires a motion today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's been handled administratively, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
What was that, a second, Steve?
And I'm sorry.
Steve was muted. I think he was saying, I don't know if he's talking or not.
Yes, that is a second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Pat Healy's group recommended that we push the dates out for commercial and the residential, that they both had to be in compliant by October of 2022. But you feel we should be more,
I think Pat assumed it was a fait accompli that there'd be something, and she was trying to argue for the most restrictive extension. I think if you asked her if she preferred no change, she'd probably tell you no change.
Okay.
And I think that's what you get if you ask most of the residents in Malibu. I mean, I think there is an interest in trying to get this done.
Okay. Is there any way we can do something to push more staff to authorize more staff, or do something to speed up the hiring of more staff? Because that's our big problem right now, it seems.
Mr. Mayor, if I knew a magic way to solve that problem, I would probably run to the patent office. So I mean, that is one issue, and then I think the other issue, and I'm going to ask the Assistant City Manager to speak up here as well. The issue is, have the City Council can set a deadline, but unless we have the staffing and the prioritization for staff to do that, we're just running into frustration, I think, for everybody. I know this area was discussed as the work plan was being prepared for this fiscal year, and I believe, if I recall the correction correctly, it did not make the cut. Lisa, could you comment on that? Make sure I've got the history correct there.
Certainly. Well, I think there's a couple things, and certainly we have been feeling the pressure of being understaffed, and we did add positions, but they weren't, as Yolanda said, they weren't in her department. They were sort of spread throughout the various departments. In terms of the staffing issues, we can certainly bring you, typically we would bring something back in mid-year. If we need to address something earlier, we could. The prior council had put a delay on the enforcement of the dark sky ordinance for commercial properties based on the COVID situation for businesses. There was never any deadline, there was never any time frame put on that. They just said extend it. I don't know at the time that we thought we would still be dealing with it 18 months later, or that it would then start to trickle into the deadlines for residential. I think part of the problem is not just the staff that has to do the enforcement on our code enforcement staff, or the building and safety staff who has to review plans, but it's also that when we have these ordinances, not everybody knows. The people who come to these meetings, especially when you're talking about residential, the people who are very focused on it know about it, but the rest of the residents and constituency in the city don't know until we do an outreach campaign. And we've done that for all kinds of ordinances that the city has prepared. But nothing really has yet been done on this in terms of pushing this out, because of course we had the fire, then we had COVID, staff has been grappling with other issues. We certainly have done that with many issues with the restaurants, for example, when we did a ban on plastic straws and cutlery that there was a robust campaign and outreach that was done to make sure everybody knew what was expected. I think what the staff is up against is, how do we do this when we have not yet had the capacity and the ability to do that outreach? And so we're looking for a path forward in a way to do that. And we have had limited staff, and we can certainly come back and address those things. We can come back and address permit fees. Certainly that doesn't really help us deal with the compliance issues. Permit fees, all fees have to come, it takes time. We have to do a public hearing, so it has to be noticed. It takes 60 days to go in effect. We can certainly do that. We can also work with the city attorney in terms of fines. My understanding in the past has been that fines, there is some limitation on the amount of fine that can be assessed depending on what the violation is, and we'd have to work with the city attorney's office on what is acceptable. So all these things can be done. We're just asking for some guidance because I think staff has been struggling to move forward just based on depth of staff and our abilities to do the outreach we need to do. And certainly, as Richard said, all new projects are definitely flowing through this ordinance. It's a question of, how do we address all those people? I think we're all kind of worried about what this looks like when we're talking about residential, and we haven't even begun to talk to our residents so that they understand what this means for them, because for the most part, they're not coming into City Hall for a project. This might be something that will surprise them. And we found it's best practice to do all the outreach we can ahead of time. And we just haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Bruce, I'm going to ask for a friendly amendment to make outdoor lighting and commercial zoning and residential zoning to be October of 22.
That's the deadline, Paul.
That's the deadline. It gives us a year to notify people, gives Benya some time to develop some pieces for people who weren't planning on doing anything to their house. I mean, the shopping centers are more aware, but the people, the residents, most of them are not aware. We're going to need to have somebody who can actually go out and say, this fixture is not in compliance. And it's going to take a little while for us to ramp up on that. I mean.
All right, so I'll accept the amendment if it is conditioned on a good faith effort to up the enforcement, the non-compliance fees as best we're capable, so that people know that they're going to be seriously affected if they don't comply by the new deadline we're giving them. And I want to say, I don't mean to suggest any fault on the part of planning or enforcement. I get that they're overworked. I have a hard time accepting that we couldn't have done better outreach by now, because it's easy to do outreach. That's just publishing things. And I don't want the last thing I want to see is permit fees being raised as a result of this, because that's just charging people for doing what we're telling them to do. I want people who aren't doing what we're telling them to do to be paying for it, not the people who are required to do it and they're trying to do it. They shouldn't have to pay us money to be allowed to do what we're telling them to do. So if we can make a good faith effort to bring back within the next 3 months a revised fee schedule for penalties that maybe even pays for another code enforcement person, I'll support that friendly amendment.
Okay, Steve, I believe you seconded the motion. Will you accept those changes?
I'll accept that. And I would just suggest that what the city wants to do is maybe contact the IDA. They have brochures and a whole bunch of materials that we may be able to get our hands on to help us sort of communicate to the community out there that we're moving forward with this process. But yes, I will accept that change, Paul, that amendment.
So Paul, just to be clear, it's a little complex, but so can your amendment be that the motion is to extend the dates to 2022, October 2022, and within the next 3 months to bring back to us a proposal to increase the administrative fines and other penalties that can be assessed for failure to comply by that new date.
I understand that. John, did you get that down?
I did. Thank you.
But that does not include gas stations. Gas stations are still on the.
Gas stations are, we're not doing anything about the gas stations. The gas stations are already not in compliance.
Okay.
We should look at better fines for them too.
Yeah.
Kelsey, will you take the roll, please?
Mayor Grisanti, if I could just clarify one point, I believe the council is still intending to initiate amendments to the MMC to change these deadlines. So we would still need to adopt the resolution initiating those amendments. That could be a separate motion if you'd like, but I believe that's the process.
I thought that's what we were doing, but we're changing it to all of them October 2022.
October 15th, 2022.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what the,
So, Mr. Mayor, the initiation here would direct staff to bring this through to the Planning Commission, which would be the next step on that. We understand from the motion that we would not be taking this to Zeracis. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Malika. But
Correct.
so then it would just proceed then through the Planning Commission, just with the change on the dates. And then once that gets through Planning Commission, that would come up to City Council.
That is correct. I'm actually I'm going back through this resolution one more time, and correct, there is nothing that we would need to change. Section 3 of the resolution this evening directs us to go to the Planning Commission.
Well, shouldn't we state in this resolution what it is we're directing them to seek to have approved?
John, do you see an issue with that? I know we normally don't, but I'm looking at, where was that paragraph?
Well, the resolution should accurately reflect that the council has directed staff to return, accurately reflect the dates that the council has authorized.
Right. I'm thinking we could modify perhaps
Section 1A.
That's, I think, the best place. We put in a recital there of what the council's asking for.
Yep. And then it can also be put in Section 2, initiation.
Okay.
All right. So just so I understand, the deadlines are going to come and pass before this all happens. And then Planning Commission is going to have a hearing and they're going to make whatever recommendation they make. And then we're going to be having this discussion again on whether to actually do what it is we just decided we're going to do. Is that how this works?
Unfortunately, yes, that is the process.
There's no way for us to just do it.
Yeah, that's my question.
No, unfortunately, this is an amendment to your zoning code. And because it's an amendment to your zoning code, it has to go to the Planning Commission, which recommends, pursuant to state law, all actions related to the zoning code.
Is there I want to go back to the original thought that said, let's leave everything where it is. Yeah. Well, yeah, because this is right. I mean, by the time it gets to the Planning Commission back up, and is there a way for us to just announce an extension or something that doesn't force us to go back and change the ordinance, and we just start going forward saying, here's the dates we're going to start enforcing this thing?
Do we have the capacity to act like an executive order where we're saying we direct staff not to enforce this prior to October 15th, 2022? And the statute just stays exactly the same? John Cuddy, can you answer that? That's how the president can act, I know.
Well, I mean, you have an ordinance, Councilmember Silverstein, in place that directs enforcement. So it becomes a code enforcement issue at that point for failure to comply with the code. I think what staff is recommending is that you push those dates so to buy some time relative to code enforcement so that you don't have to initiate those actions at present, and you can give some time for notice and a right to voluntarily comply before you have to initiate code enforcement. Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the thrust of the action, but
You are correct.
I mean, it's really up. No, I think the council would have to. I mean, the answer is yes. The council could leave the ordinance as is, but it's a code enforcement action. Whether code enforcement falls technically outside of the purview of the council, and it gets enforced as staffing and other things permit. But
so it's a ridiculous amount of red tape. But Paul, why don't we the motion just stands? Let's just vote on doing that process with the direction that it be October 15th, 2022.
Okay. Kelsey, can we take the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. That takes us to item 6D. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, good evening again. If I may have my presentation on this. My next slide, please. What we're proposing here is an amendment to the TUP section of the Malibu Municipal Code for the benefit of the farmers market because of their displacement due to the construction of the college. When the ordinance was originally passed, it was anticipated that the Santa Monica College building would be completed no later than January 1st, 2022. As you see below in the, it's kind of hard there in the strike through because the 4 looks like it kind of carries over the strike through on the 2. But essentially what happened here is when this was last brought before the council, everybody from discussing this with the city college construction groups, it was expected that construction would be done. That is not the case. Our ability to let the farmers market use the chili cook-off lot as parking as during their displacement from construction, it expires the end of this year. And so what we'd like to do to prevent any problems is pretty much retain most of that language, which would be this provision shall expire the earlier of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the college or extend it out to, or they would have until January 1st, 2024. We felt that this was a reasonable timeline given the construction activities. We did reach out to the college. However, at the time of us preparing the report, and as of today, actually, I'm not aware of them returning the messages we left them. But I'm available for any questions, but that is what we are proposing. We would take this to the Planning Commission and then come back to the council. It's the same process as before for this to be official, and we'll be making a point to get this done before the end of the year so that the farmers market is not displaced.
Do we have any members of the public?
No, Mayor Grisanti, you don't have any speakers on this item.
I'd like to recognize Karen Fair, whose hand is raised.
Thank you. I would like to move to adopt resolution 2155.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Bruce, would you like to discuss this?
I would. I have a couple questions, and I'd like to propose a friendly amendment based on the questions I'm asked. First of all, I just want to note that I support the farmers market, and I think we should be giving them the ability to use the lot. I'm concerned and upset a little bit the fact that this perpetuates that parcel being covered by stones. I mean, the history, for anyone who doesn't know it, is immediately after the Woolsey fire, SCE used that lot as a temporary emergency work yard. They covered it with stones. They were required to pick them back up and replace the field after they were done. And for one reason or another, the city let them just leave the lot destroyed the way it is. It's not supposed to be in the condition it's in. And this just perpetuates it staying that way. So environmentally, this is terrible. I would like the friendly amendment. Oh, I have a question, then I'll do the amendment. The question is, what's going to happen to the farmers market after the college is built? Are they going to continue to be allowed to use the college's parking lot, or are they going to have to be finding a different place to operate?
It's my understanding that they would be going back to the farm, the college parking lot.
Okay, so I would like to make a friendly amendment that this be conditioned on the farmers market enforcing all applicable public health ordinances and orders, because I've seen a lack of enforcement of public health requirements at the farmers market, including masking issues and including pet restrictions. They have a sign that says,
I don't think this is an agendized action.
well, it's a proposal as a condition to the amendment, and it is agendized. We can put any conditions on it that we wish. So my proposal is that we put a condition on the free parking using the chili cook-off lot, that the farmers market must comply with all applicable public health ordinances and orders. Otherwise, they don't get to use the lot.
But the health department makes them do that, Bruce.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't enforce it.
John, my concern here, I'm wondering if this is the proper vehicle, because this is a city ordinance. We're not amending the conditional use permit for the farmers market. What I am thinking, though, is those are very valid points that are brought up, and it's a problem. I'm wondering if I could just enforce that through the CUP.
Well, I'm just saying they get free parking so long as they're enforcing the rules. If they stop enforcing the rules, they don't get the free parking.
Bruce, can I suggest an alternative thing? Alternately, I'd like you to call them and explain that they're not in compliance and you don't want to ask the city to report them to the health department.
You know, this is the same issue as as Richard said earlier, that when you have the whip hand of code enforcement, it's better than when you're just asking people to comply with the law. We have the ability legally to say we can refuse free parking, we can grant them unlimited, unconditioned free parking, and we have the right to place any condition we wish on what we're granting as a privilege. And all I'm saying is that the grant of the privilege should come with a condition that they're in compliance with that law. And if they're not, then they stop getting to use the parking lot. I think John will tell you that's lawful.
Yes, I think we'd have to make we might have to make some other tweaks to the ordinance.
I think that
but it is
the
lawful.
reason that we're letting them use it is we have agreed that the farmers market is a community-oriented activity that many of our residents enjoy and feel protective about. And I don't want to be, it's one thing to go to them and tell them you need them to change X, Y, and Z. And I think if that's something you've noticed, you should tell them that, and I'm sure they would react properly. But I don't want to be quoted in the paper as saying I have the whip hand, and so they have to do what I say. And I don't think that that's what you want to be quoted as either.
I will already be quoted as that, and I don't care.
Bruce, I believe that the farmers market has got a contract with the county. And I believe the county's got a whole set of rules that they're required to follow. Now, whether the county is enforcing those rules as strong as they should, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think from what I see when I go down to the farmers market, I think Deborah is pretty insistent on making sure that, you know, they're cleaning up the stuff, the trash cans are picked up. So if there's stuff missing, probably there's things they're not doing, probably the place to go is back to the county and tell the county to enforce the rules that they have. But I don't think I want to put more, you know, look, running that farmers market has been a real battle, all right? Between COVID, between the auto shows, between all the rest of the stuff going on down there. And I think Deborah has done one hell of a job keeping it going and keeping it running during all that process. And like Paul said, this is a community event. It's one of the few community events that we have every week that people like to go to. And I don't think I want to make her life any more difficult than it already is.
So
Karen, I see your hand is raised. Karen, I see your hand is raised.
Okay, Bruce, were you finishing your sentence?
Well, just, you know, if Paul doesn't want to accept the friendly amendment, it just won't be accepted, and that'll be the end of it, which is fine.
Well, I didn't make the motion or second it, I don't think.
Thought you did.
No, Karen made it. I seconded it.
So Karen, if you don't want to accept it, then it'll just be the end of it.
Well, I don't, but I just want to make a couple of comments. Code enforcement seems to be a theme tonight on several issues, and it's a challenge. And I don't know, maybe I'm just unaware, is the city doing this kind of health department code enforcement in any other situations, in retail or restaurants or anything?
No, council member.
I don't see how we would do that with just one entity, with the farmers market. And I agree, I'd like to see all of that enforced by the county, but that's their job. And maybe we all need to get on the phone and talk to our supervisor or her office. And then the other thing I just wanted to make a comment was on the Bell Lot. The problem with the Bell Lot is not the city's wish to keep it as it is. There's a coastal appeal, and it's been confirmed at least twice, to my knowledge, that until the Coastal Commission hears that appeal, that lot unfortunately has to remain as it is. So
Karen,
anyway,
I'm not
I'd
talking
like
about the Bell Lot. I'm not talking about the Bell Lot. I'm talking about the chili cook-off lot. That was first used by SCE before they went and used the Bell Lot. And it was covered with gravel, and it remains covered with gravel, and it was supposed to be removed.
Okay.
The chili cook-off lot.
Talking about the wrong lot. Anyway, I would just like to reiterate my original motion to adopt resolution 2155.
Right. We have a motion and a second. Kelsey, will you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. I think we only have one thing left. Item 7A. 7A is a request from me that we sign on to a letter asking for the cleanup of Santa Susana Field Laboratories move forward. I was approached by several other municipalities and government agencies asking us to sign on to this. And I can't imagine that any of us don't want that cleaned up. And I don't know that this is going to have any effect, but this is a Superfund cleanup site, and it has been dragging on for years, and I would love for it to get done. And if a letter with the signature of the city of Malibu on it will help, I would very much love for us to do that. Do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor Grisanti, you don't have any speakers for this item.
Karen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I would absolutely like to go on record in support of this. That's all.
Thank you. Bruce?
I move we approve your letter.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Kelsey, will you take the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Silverstein,
Yes.
Councilmember Euring,
Yes.
Councilmember Fair,
Yes.
Mayor Grisanti.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I'd like to adjourn the meeting, and I would like to thank everyone. And I know that there is a reason that we gutted the agenda, but we were able to get out of here before 9:45. But
I'll take it.
I'll take any victory we get.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Stay
very
well,
much.
everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.